My name is Tiana Onyiloyi, first of all, and I am the coordinator of the African American History Program at the Arkansas State Archives, and I am also the liaison to the Black History Commission of Arkansas. They give me a topic, and then I have to make it happen. So I just want to say I appreciate each and one of you coming out today. Please fill out your comment cards because they will have a event coming up in June, and we don't have a topic yet, so you might write something down, and we might be doing your subject. And if you are an educator and you need the professional development certificate, you can go to the back table back there and we'll get your certificate. Again, thank you so much for coming. Yes, I can.
It's a pleasure and an honor to be here this morning. Those of us who are in the history business in one branch or another always worry whether or not there's really I hate to say it, a market, an audience for what we believe in. Having people come out for an event like this is proof to us and a reminder to others that history matters to a lot of people. It's not the kind of abstraction, history is not just an abstract thing, something that happened in the past, and oh, that's cute. And you know, for a lot of people, you hear them say, oh, I've always loved history, but they don't want to stop and actually learn anything about it. They like the idea of history. The fact that you've come here this morning means you want to know more than the fact that history exists. You want to know. You want to make a connection with that past. That connection is made through speakers who can interpret the stories. That connection is also made by you coming to the primary sources, making contact with what's left of the history in the form of documents, artifacts, records. Yeah, this is a plug for the state archives, folks. I'm only 2 weeks in the job and I've got to get those attendance figures up. At any rate, when I see enough people here on a Saturday morning, a cold Saturday morning, although it's a beautiful day for it, coming out to learn something new, that gladdens my heart. Because it's a reminder that what we do as historians matter. That keeping alive the stories matters, that we can pass them down to our children and they can pass them on to their children. It's important to get the facts right, and it's important to keep the emotions right too. Understanding that the past is not just a bunch of dry statistics, but it's stuff that has a connection to today's institutions, to today's populations. But I look forward to more occasions when we can talk and learn from each other about Arkansas's great past. Thank you very much.
Left, right, left. Wartime, march. Left, colors, off. Left, face. Present, colors. Left, colors, off.
as chairman of the Black History Commission of Arkansas, it is my duty and honor to welcome you here this morning. The board of the Black History Commission of Arkansas, Dr. Jessie Hargrove, who is my vice chair, stand please and remain standing. Dr. Cherisse Jones-Branch. Dr. Hargrove is representing Little Rock. Dr. Cherisse Jones-Branch is representing Jonesboro. Miss Elise Hampton, Conway. Reverend Ricky Lattimore, McGee. Pat Finley Johnson, Pocahontas. And me, Carla Hines Coleman, Little Rock. Now, I want to thank the staff at the Arkansas State Archives for always being here for us. You know, the Black History Commission, we have a board, we don't have an office, but our mission and duty is to preserve, collect, and present African American history for the state of Arkansas. And it is to be housed at the Arkansas State Archives. So on that note, I want to our new director to come up and so you can see him and he can introduce himself. And I also want to thank the Mosiaic Templars Cultural Center, Dr. Christina Shute, and the great museum staff. This is an opportunity to bring out information and for you to go back home and get some of that stuff out of the closets, your old bags, suitcases, the attics, and just share it with the Black History Commission so that the state archives, so that other people can know these histories, these stories, and cherish the memories of those who served this country in times of war. Thank you.
Ms. Coleman, sorry, about to knock out the chair. She wants to say something real quick.
Mr. Brown and Mr. Dunn, not General Dunn, the ROTC at Mills High School, are they still in the house?
They up there.
Oh, okay. Everybody can't see you, but I wanted to give them, I just wanted to recognize them. Nobody saw him, but there he is in the balcony raising his hand. But he was so kind, he and Mr. Dunn, to, I don't know your titles, to come out and bring the color guard this morning. And I thank him for his friendship and giving us the honor of having the color guard here this morning. And then everybody that's in the military, please stand. We have some in uniform, but I want everybody to see those that have served and been in the military. Would you please stand so everybody can see you? Thank you for your service. Thank you. All right, T.
We're going to take about a 5 to 10 minute break so you can stretch your legs before we bring our last speaker. So if you want to take a break, use the restroom, stretch your arms for us. Okay. I think we're ready, Ms. Coleman. You can introduce our next speaker. He is excited about being here, and we're excited to bring him all the way from Virginia. Oh, you want to say something?
Yeah, he's going to introduce us.
Oh, okay. I love to add people to the program. Come on up.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Nathaniel Todd. I'm your Secretary of the Arkansas Department of Veterans Affairs. On behalf of our governor and Secretary Hurst, who's the Secretary of Parks, Tourism, and Heritage, I want to thank you. I want to thank those educators for being here. Aren't we glad to be Americans? I share with you that, Ms. Coleman, this program is so important that you've got a bunch of joint officers here.
All right.
We have two of our former adjutant general, Joe Chasteen, Joe Wolford. Would you please stand, please? I'll tell you, in today's Army, these leaders have led soldiers from all across not only Arkansas, but our nation. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right.
This program is so important for the Arkansas Black History Commission to bring it here, that we have representatives from Senator Bozeman and Senator Cotton's office. Patricia, would you stand up? Patricia Herron from Senator Cotton's office. And Colonel retired Anita Deason from Senator Bozeman's office. But I'm going to get out of the way of this great general you got coming up to speak next. General Dunn, and he must have brought all of Arkansas Tech here. And we're thankful for Arkansas Tech to be here. I tell you, General Johnson, sir, would you stand up, please? General Johnson. All right. I want to thank the educator and the commander of MEPS. Would you stand up, please, young lady? A major in our Army. Please stand. Yes. The professor of science from the University of Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Colonel Morrow, would you stand? I'm going to get out your way so this great general, where that general at? Where General Dunn at?
He's coming up next.
I'm going to get out your way, Ms. Coleman. Thank you for being here, Ms. Coleman.
And thank you.
I am here to present to you our first speaker, Tamela Tenpenny-Lewis. Tamela Tenpenny-Lewis is a co-founder, charter member of Preservation of African American Cemeteries, a nonprofit group organized to identify, document, and preserve African American cemeteries. Ms. Tenpenny-Lewis is the recipient of the Association of Gravestone Studies, Oakley Certificate of Merit Award, and the Outstanding Achievement in Preservation Advocacy Award presented by the Preservation Alliance of Arkansas through its annual Arkansas Preservation Awards. She can also be seen in the AETN documentary, Silent Storytellers. The documentary explores the history, culture, and importance of preserving Arkansas's cemeteries. Ms. Tenpenny-Lewis is also a genealogist and served from 2012 to 2015 as the national president of the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society. I present to you Ms. Tamela Tenpenny-Lewis.
But I'm pleased to be here. I'd like to thank the staff of the Black History Commission for the invitation to speak with you today. And I can honestly say that I am not fluent in the history of the B1 band, but I think I do know enough to be able to present them to you. Looking for the mouse. The United States Navy refused to admit people of color into its ranks until 1937, and then only in the service positions, such as mess attendants. After President Franklin Roosevelt suggested the placement of good Negro bands aboard battleships several months into World War II, it was decided that black bands would be placed at pre-flight schools at the University of North Carolina, UNC, in Chapel Hill, and St. Mary's College in Moraga, California. Three of the first gentlemen to be enrolled in the B1 band was Mr. Simeon Holloway, Mr. Calvin Morrow, and Mr. Jewett White. The Forgotten First, the B1 U.S. Navy Band, the first all black band of the Navy. Since the inception of the Navy, African American musicians have stood by their fellow sailors in the cause of freedom and democracy around the world. The story of the B1 band, who fought through racial adversity, supported their local community, and valiantly served their nation in a time of need, highlights a forgotten chapter in the extraordinary accomplishments of our greatest generation. This was a statement by the senior chief musician, Michael Baez, the forgotten first. And as you can see, not clearly, but as you can see, this is a picture of the band when they were in first formation. The band consisted of 44 African-American musicians. And of course, as already stated, they broke the rank of the racial barriers by being in general rank. And these young men were all enrolled at North Carolina A&T and Dudley High School in Greensboro, North Carolina. The enlistees came from North Carolina Central, Hampton University. Now, we have any graduates, they give me a woo-woo. Hampton University, South Carolina State, Johnson C. Smith, and Hillside High School in Durham. These young men some were in college already, some were coming straight from high school, and many of them had no formal training in music. The historian Alex Albright, who is the author of the book, and this is a copy of the book here, Forgotten First, the B1 U.S. Army Band, was stated in some of his quotes from the book that talked about how the members had to march, and I'll read a little bit later from some excursion, from his quotes. But at the end of the morning, when they were done with their work, the practicing and playing for cadets to change classes, they had to march back to the Hargrave Center to eat lunch because the university wouldn't allow them to eat at their facilities, because you have to remember, things were segregated at that time. With them having no formal music training during World War II, it was a whites-only school. And then they were also employed at UNC. They worked every day from July 1942 until their transfer to Hawaii in May of 1944. And again, they had to march back and forth because they couldn't be housed on campus. This is the community center that was structured for the bandsmen to live in. And of course, when we are, it was the community stood behind them because it was not something that they would see on a regular basis. And the people in the community realized that, the band's presence on campus was a matter of change, that things were moving in the area for blacks to not be in servant capacities, and that it would give the children hope that they would not, that there were other opportunities out there for them, not to just be janitors or cooks or clothes washers. And after the Navy, after the gentlemen finished their pre-flight training, they were shipped off to Hawaii. They trained in Norfolk and served at Chapel Hill, and then they were transferred to Pearl Harbor. In October of 1945, the men of B1 began mustering out because they did remain in Hawaii to the end of the war. And there were a lot of musicians, and if you study the history of the B1 band and learn of some of the bad actors, you'll find that John Coltrane, the saxophonist, was one of the members of the band and came into Hawaii after that first group left. Now, with the band has been celebrating for 77 years, okay? These gentlemen, and we're talking, the majority of these young men were born in 1920, 1921. So they are, you know, in their late 90s, those that are still living. And in the 1954 is when they had their first reunion. And they've started in the 80s having reunions every year. So this is a poster of the 75th anniversary. It was held in Washington, D.C. And I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself. There were 2 celebrations of the year of their 75th anniversary. There was the unveiling of the marker in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and you can see it reads, in May 1942, a group of 44 African-American musicians broke U.S. Navy's color barrier, enlisting at general rank. Barracks were 1/5 of a mile north. So, and that was held on May 27th, 2017, which was 75 years. This is a picture of Mr. Holloway and Mr. Morrow with Alice Albright, who is the author. And Alex Albright is a professor of East Carolina University and has ensured that the band will be remembered by being their historian and putting together this book. For decades, the historical record continued to say that those who trained at the Great Lakes Naval Academy Center were the first African Americans to serve in the modern Navy at a rank other than messman. However, this was not true. More than 100 African American bands were commissioned at Great Lakes, but they weren't the first. The official Navy record claimed for decades that black enlistments at general ranks began on June 1st, 1942. 4 days after the men of the B-1 had been sworn into duty and nearly 6 weeks after they had enlisted. Mr. Holloway made a statement that, you know, they have not been recognized yet as the first, you know, to integrate the Navy as bandsmen, or the first band, and because these gentlemen from the Great Lakes were the ones that were given the credit. On February 14th, 1981, the Navy School of Music awarded honorary degrees to the band members. But after that, the band's role in the Navy's integration again seemed to slip from history. So as you can see, it was very important for Mr. Albright to write this history, because even though they have been celebrating for 75 years, that history is not recorded with the Navy. And also with that celebration, with the historical marker, it was a festival of a couple of days, a lot of family members. And with these reunions with the B-1 band, they're descendants now, because there are only 2 survivors. There's 42 that are deceased, and we will pay tribute to them today. And but the members, some of the members I'd like to mention to you are James Morgan, who was the drum major for the B-1 band. And he was born July 1st, 1915 in Tuckahoe, North Carolina. And Huey Lawrence, who was one of the band members, in an interview, he was talking, you know, he was laughing in his interview and talking about how the way Morgan would strut, you know, the drum major. He said, and these are his words, "He's leaning back past being straight back." Do I need to repeat that? He's leaning back past being straight back. We got the drum majors in here, musicians. So I can't do it in my heels. Okay. But anyway, and then he says, I mean, he's leaning back so that his hat's almost hitting the ground, and straight too, but past parallel to the ground. So, so Mr. Morgan was a beloved music teacher for 37 years and was a band director at Dudley High School. And these gentlemen, once they left the war, they came back to their communities, and they were teachers, lawyers, doctors, and of course, entertainers. Mr. Morrow this is from an interview with him, and he was quoted in saying that being in the service and being in the situation we were just like family. And nearly after 2 years, the band, once the band, and he mentions about the band being transferred, but he says that before us, the only image the Navy had of blacks was as servants. Anybody that saw that band, they could say the Navy has made some progress. We could be seen as a role model so others could say, I can be more than just a servant. After the war and they returned home, of course, these gentlemen all returned to segregation. Mr. Morrow recalls a particularly hurtful incident where he had been traveling by train across the country to Norfolk with white sailors. When they arrived at night, they were placed in the same barracks. But the next morning at breakfast, while the sailors and German prisoners gathered in the same mess hall, the others in charge directed Morrow to dine with the black sailors. He said, it hurt that they pulled me out and segregated me. There are others who have had careers, distinguished careers. Mr. Simeon Holloway became an actor. He appeared in episodes of Good Times, 227, Hill Street Blues, and other shows. Mr. James Morgan. Now, Mr. Morgan was, Mr. James Parsons, who was the band director of the B1 band. And Mr. Parsons was the first black named to the Federal District Court in the continental U.S. on August 9th, 1961. President John F. Kennedy appointed him as a judge in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Illinois. Born in 1911 in Kansas City, Mr. Parsons earned a bachelor's degree from Milton University in Decatur, Illinois in 1934. Held various teaching posts in a clean position, served in the Navy during World War II, and later went on to earn his master's and law degree from the University of Chicago in 1949. He joined a law firm in Chicago and taught law at John Marshall Law School. In 1950, he became an assistant corporation counsel for Chicago and then an assistant U.S. attorney. And we're talking about a musician, y'all. After he campaigned for a Cook County Superior Court judgeship, Parsons finally won the position in 1960 and served until his history-making federal appointment. Rising to serve as a chief judge of the district court, Parsons retired from trial work in 1992. He died in Chicago on June 19, 1993, at the age of 81 after a long illness. These are some pictures from the marker celebration. As you can see, there are pictures of each of the sailors and the female that's in the white. She is the wife of Mr. Jewett White. He wasn't able to attend, but she was there to represent him. And this is now we're in Washington, D.C. for the second celebration because they celebrate the reunion in August of every year. So this was a celebration, and this is a picture of Captain Collins and the Master Chief Werner with Mr. Holloway and Mr. Morrow during that celebration. And from the reunions, they've been celebrating from 1954 to 2019. So this is just a picture of the gentlemen at one of the reunions. The U.S. Navy Band are standing on the steps of the barracks in Chapel Hill. And this was a dinner that the musicians had. And these are just some shots. The first reunion was in 1954, and the members gathered again on those steps. Recognize anybody? Here's another one of them. As you can see, these men are distinguished looking, handsome. And with the reunions, you know, their children and grandchildren are now maintaining the reunions. And these are some of the gentlemen that were in the band. You got Charles Wood, it's a picture of him playing bass this was during the 1985 reunion. Abe Thurman plays the trumpet. Thomas Buck Garvin is playing in Greenville, North Carolina. And then you have Huey Lawrence with Tommy Bell. And then the 75th reunion in Washington, D.C. continues. It was a huge celebration. The Navy recognized them. There were interviews. I mean, just a wonderful weekend. You know, church. They were honored at a church, and that's me, sitting between Mr. Morrow and Mr. White. Yeah, I'm all up in the mix. Now, of course, okay, do we have any Greeks in the house? All right now, well, when I call you out, go ahead and do a little call, let us know you're here. But in our history, sororities and fraternities are a staple in the Black community. And a lot of those musicians were members of fraternities. The picture at the top, this was taken in Washington, D.C. We were at a book signing at a library. That's why I said Greeks in the house, but actually we were at the library. And you can see the deltas, Delta Sigma Theta. All right. Okay. And then we have the Brothers of Omega Psi Phi, and I did see one here. All right. And the Brothers of Kappa Alpha Psi. And I would like for you to know that Mr. Simeon Holloway is 99, and he has been a Kappa for several decades. And he is still active. And then Mr. Morrow is a brother of Alpha Phi Alpha. All right. And of course, saving the best for last, the sorority of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. All right, and Mrs. Morrow is a soror. So we have a little fun, of course. You know, I'm the one. We got to get the Greek party going. No matter, I don't care if you're 102, you can still get it going. So anyway, this is a couple of pictures from the 77th reunion, which was last year in August in 2019. So it was in Vegas. And then this is a poster of all of the members. And so at the time, over the last 3 years, there were 4 survivors, and now we are down to 2. So the last 2 surviving B1 band members are Mr. Simeon Holloway, who just had his huge birthday party in Las Vegas on December 15th, where he turned 99 and has already planned his 100th birthday party on a cruise ship during Thanksgiving. So you're all invited. Anybody want to take the cruise and join Simeon? And then Mr. Morrow is the young, tender age of 97. So these 2 are inviting you to the 78th reunion, which will be in August of 2020 in San Diego, California. Now, you know how you watch movies and every great actor has their theme song? Well, as a presenter, I have a closing song. And that song is important to me because it pays tribute to those that have come before us. And I'm going to play it, and we're going to have a tribute to those 44 men. And I'm going to ask you, when you see their picture come up, to please call their names, because that's how they continue to live on. They live on in us, they live on in our communities, and we need to be mindful of writing our histories and listening to the stories.
There's a road we've been traveling, lost so many on the way, but the riches will be plenty. What the price we had to pay. There's a dream in the there's a struggle that we have and there's pride in my heart, 'cause I know where I'm going. Yes, I do. And I know where I've been.
But thank you so very much. And if you have any questions about getting to the reunion in August or to the cruise ship in November, let me know. Thank you.
Dr. Cherisse Jones-Branch is the James and Wanda Levon Professor of History and Director of the State Digital Press at Arkansas State University at Jonesboro, where she teaches courses in U.S. women's civil rights, rural African American history, and heritage studies. Dr. Jones-Branch received her bachelor's and master's degree from the College of Charleston, South Carolina, and a doctorate in history from the Ohio State University, Columbus. She has been teaching at Arkansas State University since 2003. Dr. Jones-Branch is the author of numerous articles on women's civil rights and rural activism. In 2014, she published Crossing the Line, Women in Interracial Activism in South Carolina during and after World War II with the University Press of Florida, and is the co-editor of Arkansas Women, Their Lives and Times, forthcoming in 2018 from University of Georgia Press. She is also working on a second monograph, Better Living by Their Own Bootstraps, Rural Black Women Activism in Arkansas, to be published the University of Arkansas Press. Dr. Jones-Branch is also on the Black History Commission of Arkansas and is the board chair of the Arkansas Humanity Councils. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I present to you and introduce Dr. Cherisse Jones-Branch.
I just wanted to say about the Arkansas Women book, that's already out. Arkansas Women, Their Lives and Times, go and pick up a copy. And literally about 2 or 3 days ago, I sent my next monograph, Better Living by Their Own Bootstraps, about African American women's activism in rural Arkansas. I sent the revised version back to the University of Arkansas Press, so I have been able to move that off my desk. So I am thrilled. I want to first say thank you for having me come and speak today. I'm always very happy and proud to represent Jonesboro, represent my university by coming and giving these talks. I also want to thank Ms. Tenpenny-Lewis. That was a fabulous job. I took lots of pictures, and I'll be sharing them with my students when I go back to class next week. And so I know the title of my talk is A Debutante, a Soldier, and a War Veteran, and I am going to talk about that, but I thought I would be remiss if I did not first pay tribute to some of the Black women, soldiers and veterans who came before me, because I know well upon whose shoulders I stand, and these women's stories need to be told. They deserve to be told. And so I'm going to start with one that's very familiar to most of you in here. Harriet Tubman. Some of you may have seen the movie. If not, please go see it. It's fabulous. And of course, she's among the first African-American woman in the military. And many people don't know about her service in the military because it's not actually chronicled even briefly until the end of the movie. Sorry for the spoiler alert. But during the Civil War, Tubman volunteered for a duty with the federal forces. She was a Union Army nurse, a cook, and a spy. She was, as one source described her, a, quote, secret military weapon. And in June 1863, under the command of Union Colonel James Montgomery, she led an expedition of 150 African-American soldiers who were part of the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment in the Combahee River Raid in the South Carolina Low Country. That's very close to where I come from in Charleston, South Carolina. And in the process, they managed to free 750 enslaved African Americans, some of whom, men of course, were later recruited into the Army and into the Union Army. And these folks laid absolute waste to Confederate-owned plantations. The next example that I want to show you here is Kathleen Williams. So many people have heard about Harriet Tubman, fewer people have heard about this woman. Kathleen Williams is the only documented African-American woman who served as a soldier in the U.S. Army in the 19th century. She was born enslaved around about 1850 in Jackson County, Missouri. As I was saying, in 1861, she, like many African-American women, was actually impressed into Army service as cooks, as washerwomen for Union officers. Williams served in the Army throughout the war in such places as New Orleans and Shreveport, Louisiana, and Little Rock, Arkansas. In 1866, she disguised her gender and enlisted as not Cathay Williams, but as William Cathay in Company 8A, of the 38th Infantry, an all-black Army regiment. She said she joined because, quote, I wanted to make my own living and not be dependent on relations or friends, end quote. She managed to hide her gender for 2 years until she was outed by a surgeon at Fort Bayard, New Mexico. She was charged in 1868 with a certificate of disability. I'm going to jump ahead to World War II and talk about Black women who enlisted in the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, or WACS. Later it was just the WAC rather than the WAAC. And women who also enlisted in the Navy Waves, women accepted for volunteer emergency service. Not going to talk about women in the Coast Guard, but you need to know that African American women enlisted in the Coast Guard as well. And so when we talk about these women, people don't often think about the fact that these women were recruited right here in Arkansas. So what I'm showing you here is from the Hope Star newspaper in 1943. And their names, I think this is important, right? So you've got Helen Lacefield and Cyrilla Savage, who were sworn in as WACs, and then they were sent back to Hope to await a call to a training center. And when I saw this article, what I thought almost immediately is how many of these names have we seen that we don't know anything about? We don't know anything about these people. So when I saw these two women's names, my first thought was, when I have some free time, insert big laugh, I want to research them, because I really think it's important to locate these women, and if they're still alive, to get their stories, because traditionally the stories about the WACs and the waves and whomever have been the stories about white women, very rarely black women. Here's another example. So this was in newspapers all over the state. This is another example from Blytheville, Arkansas, in the Courier News. And you'll notice that these women were interviewed by a black WAC officer, First Lieutenant Ruth A. Lucas, who was also a Tuskegee Institute graduate. And again, this begs a couple of questions for me. What is her story? Was she from Arkansas as well? And there are tons of these sorts of things in the newspapers that we often, unfortunately, overlook. Moving on to talking about the waves. This is a picture of the first waves officers, Harriet Ida Pickens and Frances Willis in 1944. Pickens was a lieutenant. She was formerly a public health worker, and Frances Willis was a social worker. Ensign Frances Willis was a social worker, and both of them were commissioned in 1944 at the Naval Reserve Midshipman School, the Women's Reserve, in Northampton, Massachusetts. Now, what I think is important to know that not very many black women were allowed to become waves. The Navy trained one black woman for every 36 white women. And so that was about 2.77%. You should also know that Japanese and Native American women were allowed to join the waves before African American women were. And by the time we get to 1945, the year when the war ends, more than 70 African American women had joined the waves, but their percentage of the entire force was very, very small in comparison to other women who joined waves. In another example, I have here for you Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams Early, who by trade was a psychologist, and she was the first African-American woman to become an officer in the WACs, and she was also the commanding officer of the 688th Central Postal Battalion, which was responsible for delivering mail to over 7 million soldiers during World War II. And her story is particularly intriguing to me because she wrote a memoir about it. So she talked in very extensive detail about her experience and her rise to lieutenant colonel. And as I said before, she was the commanding officer for the 6888th Central Postal Delivery Battalion, also known as the 6888. Their motto was, "No mail, no morale." And it was the only all-black, all-female battalion to serve overseas during World War II. The battalion didn't receive any recognition for their service after World War II. Surprise, surprise. But later on, they were honored by President Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama. And in 2018, a monument at Fort Leavenworth was dedicated to the 6888th. And if you aren't aware of this, in 2019, the 6888 was profiled in a documentary appropriately named 6888. So you can look that up, you can view it, and a few of these women are still alive, and they talk about their experiences during World War II. In a final example, I'd like to mention Brigadier General Hazel Johnson Brown, the first black female general in the United States Army and the first black chief of the United States Army Corps. She served in the Army from 1955 until 1983. She died in August 2011 at 83 years old, and she is among the few African American women who are buried in Arlington National Cemetery. So as you can see here very clearly, I couldn't tell my story without paying proper respect to these sisters who had come before me. And there are many, many more stories like this. I suspect there are more than a few in the audience with us today. And so those stories are very important and they need to be told. And so now we can turn to my story, now that I've laid some of this foundation for you. And the big question might be, how did I find my way into the United States military? I come from a family with a long history of military service. My grandfather was a Marine in World War I. I had several uncles, thank you. I have several uncles who served in subsequent wars. My father is a Vietnam veteran. So that legacy is very long and it's very strong in my family. I found my way into the military because I decided in 1986, 1987 that I was going to pay my own way to college. I wanted to join the Army full time. I was only 17 years old, and my parents said, no, you can't do that. We want you to go to college. I had planned to go to college, but I wanted to do a few years in the Army first. They said, well, you're 17, you can't go unless we sign the documents. I said, I'll be 18 soon, then I can do what I want. But I did let them sign the documents for me when I was 17 years old. We compromised. I agreed to join the U.S. Army Reserves and go to college. And I went to basic training, and I'm going to show you some pictures in just a second. I went to basic training in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Yep, we remember, in 1988. And at that point, I don't know if they still do this, they used to split the training. So I went to basic training one summer, and the next summer after I got out of high school, I went to my advanced individual training in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Now, in between that time, and this is where the title of this talk hopefully will make sense, in between that time, I was also an Alpha Kappa Alpha debutante. I have never shown this picture publicly before. Most of all because of those hideous thick glasses. This is a very, very big deal in Charleston. When I was a debutante in 1989, they had already been doing this for about 50 years at this point. My mother, I didn't want to do it, but my mother, who is an AKA, made me. And let me be very clear about that, since Ms. Tenpenny-Lewis mentioned Greeks earlier. Although I am an AKA legacy, I am a proud 29-year member of the glorious and illustrious Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated. Just FYI. Some other pictures of me when I was a debutante. Again, some of these pictures I've not seen in 3 decades. This is bringing back some memories, right? There's another image of me there. This is me and my father. There were about 75 of us. They rounded up every Citadel cadet, every black Citadel cadet they could find. So I think we had every Citadel cadet they had on campus at that point, right, to escort us out to our fathers and that kind of thing. And so I did that summer. And then shortly after that, I left for basic training. This is me with my recruiter, Staff Sergeant Leonard. I thought he was just so fine 30 years ago. That probably had a lot to do with why I joined the Army. So what was basic training like for me? I can describe it in a couple of words. I think horrible and traumatic work well, right? Horrible and traumatic work pretty well, because I was surrounded by people for whom college was really an only option, right? For many people, it was like, if you were gonna do anything meaningful with your life, if you were gonna pull anything out yourself out of a particular kind of situation, the military was the way to go. And so I have to be fairly transparent here. I didn't come from a poor background. My parents are solidly middle class. My dad's a retired engineer, my mom's a retired educator. But this is important, and here's another image here. This is me a long, long time ago. I don't know why I'm smiling. They must have just caught me in a weak moment. And these images are so old, I cannot remember if they were basic training or advanced individual training. What is noteworthy about these pictures is that I was considerably slimmer than I am now. But what I want to point out to you about my experience in basic training, how many of you remember this movie? This was my nickname in basic training, by the way, because it was clear that I hadn't had some of the experiences that other folks had had. In fact, they considered me a bit of a privileged princess. And what I can say was that I owned that I was privileged in some ways, particularly in comparison to some of the other younger people in my unit, but certainly not a princess, because number one, I had taken the initiative to do this to pay my own way through college. And number two, I've been working since I was 15 years old. But I do want to be clear about the fact that basic training was a shock to my young system. I cried every day for 2 weeks in basic training, and I had never been far away from home, and as far as I was concerned, I was on another planet. But Fort Jackson, South Carolina is only 2 hours away from my hometown. But I didn't know that at the time. But I adjusted, and it was an opportunity for me to grow and mature, and I survived basic training. And the following summer when I got out of high school, I went to advanced individual training in Missouri, as I said, and then off to college. And so while I did graduate from the College of Charleston, I actually spent my freshman year at South Carolina State University, which is an HBCU in Orangeburg County, about an hour and a half away from Charleston. It was during my sophomore year in 1990 that my unit was mobilized, and I had to withdraw from school and prepare to go abroad to the Persian Gulf. I was 19 years old. That seems really young to me now, but it wasn't at the time. And so the unit that I was part of at the time was the 941st Transportation Company. It was based in North Charleston, South Carolina. It was a predominantly African American and male unit. If I'm remembering this correctly, out of about 120 members, only about 10 to 15 of us were women. So that presented some special issues that I hadn't talked about in 30 years. We flew from the Charleston Air Force Base to Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. This was especially traumatic because I had to leave my family. I was 19, I was too dumb to know what danger I was in potentially, but my father understood and my mother was just flat out terrified for me. I didn't think about it, right? I didn't know, I was too young. So we flew to, and here's a map, we flew to Dhahran first, and we spent about a week, I think it was, acclimating to the environment and the severe heat. And it was also the very first time that I ever saw a CD player. Back then they were new. CD players were new back then. You had to have some money to get one, right? And from there, we moved to Dhahran to someplace just outside of Riyadh in the desert, probably about maybe 30 or 40 miles away from there, 30 or 40 minutes, excuse me, away from there. And here are some of the things that I recall about my experience in the desert. It was bitterly hot during the day and freezing cold at night. There were goats and camels all over the desert. I also recall being absolutely terrified when Scud missiles went overhead and we had to sleep in chemical suits because of biological warfare. I remember that. I also recall things like, and pardon me, this is a little disgusting, but having to use the bathroom in a makeshift outhouse and then having to clean it up. I remember things like that. If they wanted to punish you in our unit, you had to clean out, whatever. It was an unpleasant experience. I also remember getting into a truck accident when my unit was on convoy and having my left eye damaged, and I had to wear a patch on that eye for a while. I was 19 years old. This is a picture of my unit from the sky, just outside of Riyadh. Like I said, this is 1990, 1991. This is a closer, well, this is actually me on a helicopter. I don't know where we were going, don't ask me. So this is me on a helicopter, one of the few occasions when I smiled and probably when I wasn't terrified. This is my unit. So we were attached to the 475th Quartermaster Petroleum Oil and Lubricants Group, right? And so right there, the 941st Transportation Company, we were a medium trucking unit. So my unit hauled diesel fuel and MoGas, right? So when they needed to fuel up, whatever, my unit was one of the units that did that. And I can tell you that was very dangerous business, right? Because we had to sometimes drive through minefields. I had at least one member of my unit who picked up something that he shouldn't have and got blown up. He's fine, but at the time we didn't know that he would be fine. So there were some absolutely terrifying moments. This is a closer shot of my unit, and as you can see here, I can't tell you which tent I lived in, but I lived in this space for 6 months, right? And as you can see here, the tanks are a considerable distance away from our unit because they're all filled with fuel, right? So it wouldn't be very smart for us to have them close by. So there were many, many moments when I was absolutely terrified, but there are also moments when I remember getting packages from home, right? And one of the most valuable items in the Persian Gulf were packages of baby wipes, right? Because there wasn't that whole having a shower thing every day. I wasn't one of the units who got to stay in the nice accommodations. We were in the middle of the desert. It was also recording tapes and writing letters home to my family, and then having them send me tapes and letters. My mother still has these items. When I came home and I shared the letters and everything with her, she cried, she took them. I haven't seen them since. But then I also remember having to, the rare opportunities when I could call home. You see, nobody had a cell phone back then. Nobody knew what it was. And so when we would call, it was often late at night on a satellite phone that might be cut out at any time. We understood what was going on, but my family didn't. They were terrified. And I was so young, again, so young and absolutely unaware of the fact that I was in a situation from which I might never return. I didn't have the wherewithal to think about the impact this was having on my family at the time. Another image here, this is not one of my unit's trucks, but this is what they looked like at the time. I understand that they're much fancier and sexier now, but I'm talking about 30 years ago. Ours were painted, of course, a desert color. It had the upside down V on it. The thing that I found very interesting, though, is that we didn't get desert uniforms until we were right about to come home. So in many ways, we were sitting ducks right in the desert. Maybe they gave them all to the regular Army, I don't know. I do have a desert uniform, but I only wore it to fly back to the United States, right? I didn't have it, we didn't wear it, they didn't give us one when we were actually in the Persian Gulf. And so, in April of 1991, my unit returned. The war ended, right? We had to clean up everything in the field. We flew back, we drove back to Dhahran, we flew back to the United States. And I remember that very well because we came back to, and that was a very long flight, by the way, probably like 22 hours or something like that. We came back, and what I remember most is when I got off the plane and came through the Charleston International Airport, was seeing my parents with tears streaming down their face, and seeing my siblings and my family with tears streaming down their face because they didn't know. They didn't know how I was or how I was going to be coming back from this experience. And so I came back, I didn't skip a beat. I went straight back to school. I transferred to the College of Charleston rather than go back to South Carolina State University. And that probably wasn't the smartest thing I could have done because I also had post-traumatic stress syndrome. Didn't know what it was. But what I do recall was that I was nervous all the time. And I remember waking up often in the middle of the night and being absolutely terrified because I didn't know where I was. And I still deal with that just a little bit now, right? I have to actively tell myself that you're in this space, you're okay, so on and so forth. It's been 30 years. My family, with the exception of my father, didn't really understand what was going on with me. My mom thought I was crazy. In fact, she told my father, she didn't say this to me, but she told my father I was behaving like a crazy person. And what he said was, there's nothing wrong with her, she just needs to decompress. And so what he did almost immediately was to make sure I got some sort of therapy, because that wasn't available when he came back from Vietnam. And he said, my daughter is not going to go through this. And I also want to say that when he took me to my unit to leave to go to Saudi Arabia, he looked at me with tears in his eyes and he said, I'm the oldest of 4 children, I have 1 brother. He said, I always knew that I might have to send my son to war one day. I never thought it would be one of my daughters. So I got counseling. And I didn't tell people for a very long time that I was a veteran, because it just didn't seem to me like people were interested in hearing a Black woman veteran's story. I moved on with my life. I graduated from the College of Charleston in 1994. I went to graduate school there, graduated in 1997, and at one point, I was still with my unit at this point. I switched to another unit, and I was slated to go to officer candidate school. I was only in E4, but they saw something in me and they thought, you know, you should consider going to officer candidate school. Also the fact that I thought then and now that I was smarter and better educated than everybody in my unit. I was better educated, actually. The commander didn't like that. I had a master's degree and he didn't. Not my problem. Anyway, but I decided to go on to graduate school instead. And I got out of the U.S. Army Reserve in 1996, right before I left to pursue a doctorate at Ohio State University. And I never looked back after that. And then one day, after living in Arkansas for a while, been here for 17 years, I realized that my experiences were important and valuable, and people needed to hear them. And people also needed to be disavowed of the notion that all veterans are men or white. And so I started telling my story. I started by getting tags on my car, veterans tags on my car. I started sporting my sticker and t-shirts like this, especially on Veterans Day. I'm wearing a veterans pin now. It's important to me. And when I fill out forms, I mark that I'm an African American, a woman, and a war veteran. It's important for them to know. And so in the years since, I tell my story. And I found that telling my story has helped other people. In some instances, it has helped people who suffer from PTSD, but their parents, their family, whoever, they don't understand what's going on. I've quite literally had to tell women students who are excited that their son or daughter is returning and they want to do this, that, and the next thing, and I've had to sit them down and say, I need you to pull up a little bit. It's too much. It's too much. They'll come back to you when they're ready, all right? Give them a break, give them a chance to breathe, give them a chance to get reacclimated, all right? You don't want to smother them right now. I'm telling you, that's the last thing you want to do. Their families don't quite understand what they're going through. So, yes, I was a debutante, and yes, I understand that that is probably some sort of privileged status, but that's not all that I am. It's not all that I was. I am also a woman veteran who proudly served her country. And it was an honor and a privilege to do so, and I gladly do it again. Thank you. I'm dealing with things that are probably war-related. Like, for example, about a year ago, I lost my hearing in my right ear. So I actually have to wear a hearing aid now. And I'm sure that in some form or fashion, this can be attributed to the time I spent around large trucks, a lot of noise, so on and so forth. So it's a process. I am working on that because, quite frankly, when I returned from the Persian Gulf, I went to the Veterans Affairs office in Charleston, South Carolina, and literally sat there all day. It's particularly important to me, as I said, after I lost my hearing in my right ear. I mean, it literally happened overnight. I went to bed and the next day I couldn't hear. The biggest thing I would, the best advice I can give them is to do the research. Be aware as much as you can of what you're going into and also what you can get out of the experience. Because here's the thing that I didn't say, yes, I had to go to war but because of the money I made overseas, I was able to pay for my college education in cash. Well, I mean, we were among the first back then to be called, because as soon as everything started happening, I mean, we were literally, I can't even begin to wrap my mind around how young we were to get a notification that we had to withdraw from school. And most of us were from Charleston. We had to go back to Charleston. We had to go back to Charleston, my apologies. We had to go back to Charleston, and we didn't know. We didn't know. And I would also say this, here's the thing about being 19 years old. In my mind, this is crazy, I know, I thought of this as a big old field trip. You know, I mean, there was just no way for me to conceptualize, you know, how difficult this experience was going to be, and especially how terrified my parents were. I distinctly remember that, as I said, as I was getting off the plane onto the tarmac in Charleston, my parents were much thinner than they were before I left. And then it was maybe 6 months to a year after I returned, I started hearing the stories about how one of my parents was so worried they had gotten sick. You know, all of these things that, you know, I couldn't process them at the time, but I know now, you know. You know, we did get to go into Riyadh. We got to do things, you know, like that. So those were useful learning experiences. But a lot of the time we were on missions. We were hauling fuel, and so that's what we were doing, trying to get back to our base camp in one piece. You know, but I mean, I learned you can't trust everybody. I learned that war is very real. It's not, you know, it's not like it is on TV by any stretch of the imagination. And I think I understood, or at least I began to understand, my mortality at that point, right? I mean, it very quickly stopped feeling like a field trip and started feeling very much like the fact that, you know what, I could return to my parents in a body bag. And that was sobering for me. I'm glad I didn't. My knees hurt enough as it is. But I thought about it. And I also want to say this, not only did I want to join the military to go to college, I wanted to be general. I wanted to be a general. All right. It didn't work out that way, but I think life worked out pretty well just the way it is. Now I would say, you know, mind your P's and Q's, make sure you know what your rights are, and also when certain kinds of things happen, it's not your fault, all right, which was very much the mentality, you know, once upon a time. You know, one of the things that happened, I mean, like I said, we were in a unit where, you know, women were like 1% of the unit, and, you know, I'm just gonna tell it like it is, these guys come around like hound dogs at night. I'm just keeping it all the way real. I didn't have any problems personally because when I would go to my drill service, my father, who was a very large black man, would drop me off. And he would just give them a look that says, I wish you would. My dad had a whip. But for other women, that was not necessarily the case. And so one of the things that we did have happen in my unit is, you know, several young women came back pregnant. You know, so things like that, you know, really did happen. But I would say be careful, be aware, know what your rights are, and, you know, and make sure other people know that you have rights too, and that there are certain things that you just simply aren't going to tolerate, right? And those are things that I didn't know back then. I think I was just largely protected by the grace of God and the fact that my dad mean-mugged everybody. So, yes, I still get up ignorantly early in the morning. I was up at 4:30 this morning. I don't like to exercise, but I still exercise very faithfully. So at one point I wanted to stay in long enough to retire, but you know, at a certain point it was just time for me to go. But I mean, one of the benefits I was able to use is, you know, the GI Bill. And I have plenty of money from serving in the Persian Gulf, right? But I also had the GI Bill, and so that helped considerably. And also when I purchased my house, I was able to use, you know, VA benefits. And at the time that I purchased my home, you know, it was difficult for people to get loans, but the interest rates were really high. I mean, the VA loan was like 4%, you know, and everybody else had to take 10 or, you know, whatever. So those are the two biggest benefits for me. is that I got out of college debt-free. Let me be clear, I got out of college debt-free. Okay? Of things to think about. And I've even had friends who, you know, have decided to go into the military in their late 30s and their 40s. I have a very good friend now who joined when she was 42. Now, I'm not about that life, but it's what she wanted to do, and it has worked out very well for her. Yeah. So I would say, like anything else, you know, explore all the advantages, explore all the disadvantages, talk to people who had done this before. I mean, I had talked to my father, but my father was drafted, right? I chose to do this. My father also had to leave college to go to Vietnam, so, you know, be very clear about their perspective on that experience, take all the information and then make a decision from there. Therapy, and like the gentleman said, staying very, very busy, and therapy. And when in those moments when I wake up, and they happen fewer and fewer, but it's been 30 years and they still happen. When I wake up and I'm like this and I don't know where I am, I'm now able to say, this is where you are, you're in this city, you're in this hotel, you know, you're whatever. You know, I know how to talk myself out of that. I want to say it was all female, but I don't think that's true. I mean, it was a challenge in some ways, you know, because I had come from a different background than a lot of the people I was there with, and I hadn't had certain kinds of experiences, and back then, if you even looked at me crazy, I cried. Right, so imagine being yelled at. I did a lot of push-ups. We did a lot of push-ups because the drill sergeants were determined that they were going to get that out of me, and that's why even until this day, I'm still very good at push-ups. Like not lady push-ups, man push-ups. I can do those, old as I am. And so, you know, I mean, I don't even know that I would go so far as to say that it was a problem now, but it was back then because I simply hadn't had certain kinds of experiences. I can say very honestly that it toughened me up. And some of the people I was in basic training with, I've been in communication with them, and even that drill sergeant, whom I thought was just the devil incarnate at the time. Couldn't tell me he wasn't evil. And we've talked since then, and I've made it abundantly clear to him that I was 17 back then, but I am not 17 now. You know, so we can come to an understanding. You know, so, but yeah, I think in many ways I needed that experience. That was the beginning of me, you know, understanding, getting some understanding of what the real world was like, and it wasn't always safe and protected.
General Gracus K. Dunn. A retired Army Brigadier General, is a native of Little Rock, Arkansas. General Dunn grew up in North Little Rock early on, and then his family moved to Granite Heights and Granite Mountain. So, as me and another historian always say, is there a bomb in Gilead? Yes, there is. All right. The neighborhood where he graduated from Little Rock Parkview. General Dunn graduated from Arkansas Tech University in Russellville, Arkansas, where he was commissioned through ROTC as an Army second lieutenant. He also was initiated into the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated and received his Bachelor of Arts degree in music in 1982. General Dunn was a career Army officer serving 35 years while stationed in numerous locations within the United States and overseas, to include Germany and Korea. He has commanded and led soldiers in the U.S. and in Korea, at all levels from platoon to general officer. His contingency operational deployments included Honduras, Panama, Egypt, Kuwait, am I pronouncing that right? Saudi Arabia, because I've already had to get some help from the audience on pronouncing some of these words. Somalia, did I say Saudi Arabia? Okay. Bosnia and Herzegovina. All right, thank you. General Dunn is also a member of the American Legion and the Veterans of Foreign Wars, VFW. General Dunn and his family reside in Woodbridge, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C.
But good afternoon, Little Rock, and thank you for the homecoming, for the welcome. I want to thank Paula for that nice introduction, and our two previous guest speakers, Ms. Tenpenny, and also Dr. Jones-Branch, for your inspirational words about your career and your service. Thank you very much. To all the veterans that are out there and those who are still serving, I really thank you. I thank you for your service that you've done in the past, and I thank you for what you're doing for this country right now, and also for the community of Arkansas. And also for the veterans. For those veterans who have served in Vietnam and Korea, we have studied your history. We have admired what you did as young men when you were once and young. And so now that you're here, you know, there's a new generation, these ROTC cadets from Arkansas Tech, as well as from University of Arkansas Pine Bluff, are going to pick up the mountain. So look here, I was asked to talk about African Americans and America's wars by Carla and Miss O. And I said, okay, so where do you want me to start and what do you want me to do? They said, we want you to go back to the American Revolutionary War. I'm like, okay, and this is how you have to look at civilian authority over the military. So being a good soldier, I want to restate the mission. You sure you want me to start from the American Revolution up until now? He said, yes, General. So I said, well, let me explain this to you. You know it's going to be like a Spike Lee movie. It's going to be good, maybe a little long, and there's no editing, okay? So anyway, we're going to talk that. And there are three things I want you to take from this. I want you to take an informed perspective from the eyes of a senior military officer. It's going to be entertaining, but we're going to walk through. We're going to start with the Revolutionary War, then we're going to flank up and come past 1812. Then we're going to come down to the Civil War. We'll get off the bus for a moment, and then we're going to power through to World War I, come down to World War II, and then we're just going to skirt around and go to flanking on to a Korea War, and then we're going to come to Vietnam and on to Gulf War. To the ROTC cadets, make sure you look at this as a staff ride, but this is your first professional staff ride from the general officer. And you too, I want you to take a look at this. And the way I'm going to craft this is one of two ways. You're going to watch the U.S. grow, and you're going to watch how Arkansas grew, as well as Little Rock. And I'm going to entwine our national history along with African American history. Okay? So you're getting a very different perspective here. All right? So we're going to power through this. Stay with me. I have my trusty PowerPoint. Well, you can't only see this right now, but I will point from time to time just to emphasize some stuff. All right? So look here. Let's pull anchor. Put on your seatbelts. Put on your Kevlar, and let's go for a ride. All right. So we're going to start from the Revolutionary War. We're going to come down past the War 1812, the Mexican War. We're going to stop over the Civil War, then come to World War I and II, as I mentioned earlier. All right. So in the beginning, what is the foundation of our Army and our Navy? And this is what the Constitution provides for us. Support, raise and support armies, and provide and maintain a Navy. Now here's the rub right here. When you look at the order of merit of the flags up here, it should be the Army, Navy, Marine Corps. But the Marines came before the Navy. Okay. So when you put up here, besides the U.S. flag, the state of Arkansas, you have the Army, the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Air Force, followed by the Coast Guard. That is the order of merit for the flags whenever they're serving an official function. The other thing you may not know is that when you have a general officer speaking, or even a retired general officer, this one star flag. This is my flag right here. So whenever you have a general officer speaking, you will always see this flag, whether it's a 1, 2, 3, or 4 star. That's something that most people don't pay attention to. That's why I say it's going to be an informed briefing that you go through besides Black history. So let's start with the Revolutionary War. From 1775 to 1783. Leadership under George Washington, King George. I'm quite sure that's Queen Elizabeth's great somebody. Uncle, grandfather. And so you look at the number of blacks that fought. That's where I want you to focus. The free and the enslaved, as well as those that fought for the British. Now, the 14 colonists, they had been there for a while, they was under the British rule, they wanted to break away and start their own country. They called the Patriots. There were some that say like, why we gotta get a divorce? Let's stay where we at. And there were some, they were called the Loyalists. And that's what you will see during this war between the British Redcoats and the American colonists. He talked about Christmas Addicts. Mulatto Man was the first killed in Boston. They supported it. And that was a setting stone right there that really kind of kicked everything off that led up to the American Revolution and the war. If you look at here, South Carolina Navy, even though it's a colony, had a number of black captains driving ships. Lord Dunmore, British governor, remember what I said, a British loyalist, first raised a regiment of Ethiopian soldiers, and they were called the Ethiopian Regiment. And you look at the number of slaves that escaped South Carolina and Georgia to go to the British. Now, why were they fighting? Well, we got some help. And you will hear about France, and you're going to hear about Brig throughout this whole series because they always played a role in whatever we do. Either they was helping us out or they was meddling. One or two things. So this time, because France had a little issue with Great Britain, they decided to help the colonists out. So they entered the war then. General George Washington even wrote a letter on his colonel says success will come to whoever side to arm the blacks the fastest. These are some of the key battles that took place. Peter Salem and Salem Poor were two African Americans who served with distinction in the Continental Army. Now, the combined U.S.-French force, led by George Washington, helped to force the surrender of Lieutenant General Lord Cornwallis. He left. So what did they do? When they signed the peace treaty in Paris, which you're going to hear a lot coming up, British recognition of America's independence. But by the time of the ratification of the Constitution, remember it took them almost like 7 years to ratify the Constitution. But there was a certain number of blacks, 3 blacks, that could vote in 5 of the 13 original colonies. Now, however, the Continental Congress in 1792 decided to have a policy banning blacks from service. However, blacks were still serving in the Navy. The biggest ban that wasn't lifted until 1942 were the Marines. They followed the British. Blacks were banned from serving in the Marine Corps until 1942. I told you this was going to be a little different. Now, the War 1812. This was kind of like, Britain was kind of like, let's rethink this. Okay, let's go back. So it was kind of a second war of independence. France decided like, well, let's rethink this too. Let's take some territory. But England and France were at war with each other. And prior to that, about 10 or 15 years earlier, this other general by the name of Napoleon had some real estate over the New World, and he needed to support his war. So he sold it to President Monroe. That brought up what? The Louisiana Purchase. That's what brought the Louisiana Purchase up. So that took place. So basically it went to a stalemate. Nobody won, no territories gained, or anything like that. The Indian Wars, that went on for a long time, until 1898. And I'll talk a little bit about that once I get past the Civil War. But as the U.S. was trying to expand and develop other states, this kind of went on because of the occupation. The Mexican War, the Louisiana Battalion of Free Men of Color served on U.S. Navy ships. It was Mexican recognition of U.S. sovereignty over Texas. And remember, people, Texas used to be its own country for a brief moment. That's why it's called the Republic of Texas, and that's why they still have attitudes now. They got attitudes. Now, we're not the South, we're Texas. Everybody knows that. And so that was the end of the conflict between Mexico and the Republic of Texas. U.S. Civil War. A couple of things I'm going to talk about. You cannot have a war and a general without having a map. Okay? You got to have a map. If you're going to fight a war, you got a general need, you got to have a map. So let me talk about this just for a moment. So you see that, excuse me. You see you have President Abe Lincoln here. This right here kind of shows some of the campaigns that took place. I can use this one right here. It's hard to see with this right here, but let me talk about this right quick, briefly. So prior to Abraham Lincoln's election, there was a lot of tension going on. It was about terror, it was about states' rights, it was about slavery, it was about everything. And so they were developing the same attitude like the 13 colleges did almost 100 years ago. And so they felt that the North was overtaxing the South, and the South felt like we like our way of life, which was slavery, which added to economics. So when you look at this, they say if Lincoln wins the election, we're going to break away. And that was started by South Carolina. Now, back then, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Virginia were considered the upper South. South Carolina, on down where you see up to Texas, were considered the lower South. The reason it's color-coded like that because once Lincoln was elected, before he was elected, South Carolina decided to break away. And back then, inauguration didn't take place until like 4 March. And that stayed that way until like 1937. So even though you know the inauguration on 20 January now, back then, inauguration, the election's in November, but inauguration took place in March 4th. Why? Because they had to count the votes, and plus, since they didn't have high-speed rail, got by horse, it took them a while to get there. So inauguration took place on 4 March. That's for all the young people to keep in mind. Now, Arkansas had a debate that is constituted about do we stay or do we go, do we stay, do we go? And a lot of these states were going with that. Tennessee, East Tennessee wanted to break away because they wanted to stay with the Union. But they didn't have no votes, and so Tennessee kind of broke away. West Virginia broke away from Virginia. But it was still a slave state. But they wanted to stay with the Union. So where am I going with this? So after Lincoln's inauguration 4 March, Arkansas seceded 6 May. But it was still a debate. Well, you see the state of Missouri, the state of Kentucky, and up there like West Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware, those are called border states. That means they were still slave states, but they stayed with the Union. That caused Lincoln some problems. So when you talk about the border states, that's what that means. They were still slave-holding states, like Arkansas and the rest of the South. However, they decided to stay with the Union. So, as you look at the U.S., 85 years old when we went to war, 31 million people. Arkansas was only 25 years old when they went to war. So it's kind of like baby boy calling big brother. What y'all gonna do? Well, we gonna deceive. Okay. Okay, here we go. So the population of the state of Arkansas was 435. You see the enslaved population. For all you historians and all you general officers that want to count the numbers and count my chart, I'm always going to use zeros. That way it stays balanced, that way nobody has any problems. Little Rock population was only 3,700. But at the time, they received gas lighting in 1860 and the telegraph in 1861. So you see the dates I'm talking about, and you see what I'm talking about, the border states. Now, the problem with Missouri and Kentucky that gave Lincoln hell, gave him problems. The Confederate States of America gave Missouri and Kentucky seats in their Congress, even though Missouri and Kentucky stayed with the Union. Southern California had pro-Confederate sympathies, but never organized as a territory. So there was a lot of friction going on, so it wasn't just cut and dry. So here we go. 22 Union states, blue, population 22 million, including 5 border states. What were they called? Loyalists, because they were loyal to the Union. Remember that in the American Revolution? You had the Loyalists and you had the Patriots. So now the Union are the Loyalists now. 11 Confederate states, the gray. So you see the population. Secessionists took place. Right down here, when you see KA, that's what I mean by killed in action. But during the war, disease took a lot of people out. It wasn't just those that were killed in battle, it was those that died of diseases. Because just the medical people just didn't have the wherewithal to take care of a lot of things that took place during the Civil War. So the Militia Act in 1862, that was signed by President Lincoln, allowed the blacks to participate as war laborers and soldiers. Now, it says the Emancipation Proclamation was signed 1 January. Well, President Lincoln really had no design to end slavery. He didn't like it, but the main issue of it was, as we expanded westward, he didn't want any more slave states. The southern states thought, well, you're trying to box us in. We want to have free states and slave states. Lincoln said, look, I would rather keep the Union together, and keep the slave, keep the Union together, I'm okay with that. Now, the other part of the puzzle is, since the inauguration was before March, he tried to get the Secretary of State, as President-elect Lincoln, to make a deal with the southern states. You can keep the slave, you can stay in the Union, as long as I can expand westward as a free state. Southern states said, no way, we're not doing that. Now, reference to the Emancipation Proclamation. First one that was issued by President Lincoln was issued in September of 1963. And basically, it was kind of like the Godfather. I'm going to make them all, you can't refuse. So I'm going to give you southern states 100 days to rejoin the Union. And so it was like, okay, didn't bite. So come 1 January, he issued by executive order the Emancipation Proclamation. But what did it do? It freed only the slaves in the southern states that succeeded. But Lincoln's problem was, does that include the border states? No, it didn't. So it's a political decision that he made. Because they were still in the Union, but they were still a slaveholder state. So the Emancipation Proclamation did not apply to them. It didn't apply to them. So by then, you had runaway slaves, freedmen, who wanted to join the Union force. So the War Department, which is actually the Army, that was the Department of the Navy, and the Army was really called the War Department when you looked at the political process. Established what is called the Bureau of Colored Troops. And then from between 180,000 up to 200,000 free and escaped slaves signed up, at least 20,000 served in the Navy. 54th Massachusetts, led by Colonel Robert Shaw, age 25. And as you can see there, Frederick Douglass has sons that participated in. They lost over 27 men on Fort Wagon. But the thing about fighting the war, the first thing you don't do is lose the colors. And everybody that's been in the military, what do? You protect the colors. This was a big deal in the Civil War. The colors go down, who's going to stand up and do this? And you saw that in the movie Glory. And we're going to talk about that just for a moment, because some of the things they did in the movie Glory were really happy about the way the Irish Americans looked at, the blacks, so far the harsh treatment, and the way they kind of fought, and they were just being used as manual labor until they got caught in the war. Because at the same time, even though they needed manpower, a lot of Union leaders just didn't believe that the black man could fight. Well, here's the thing. Most of them could not read, most of them could not write, most of them didn't know how to ride a horse for the most part. And so there was just a lot of cultural things going on they just couldn't, they just thought about. This right here, Fort Pillow, outside of Memphis, Tennessee. This is the one that people always talk about, the massacre that possibly took place or did take place. And the troops led by Confederate General Nathan Forrest were accused of atrocities in shooting Union black soldiers as they were trying to surrender. There was in a garrison mode. It was a small installation. They had a lot of Unionists, and they had a garrison of black colored troops. Congress did investigate. They said massacre could have happened, but in the fog of war, it's what it is, the fog of war, so nobody was ever prosecuted. Interesting. The first Louisiana Native Guard, Confederate States of America, was by mulattoes, all black. They offered their service to the Confederates. The Confederates said, thank you, but no thank you. Okay? And so they disbanded and they reorganized as the first Louisiana Native Guard, and then they became part of the Union. And so I'll get to the chart about did blacks participate as part of the Union and also the Confederacy. So I will touch on that just a little bit. This right here, the Battle of Shaking Farm, Major Benjamin Butler, his name is going to come up a lot because he was the one that recruited troops down there with the Louisiana Native Guard. Benjamin Butler, he was from Massachusetts. And so he believed that the Negro, if they use the term, or the colored troops, could fight, and we should recruit them. And he kind of convinced Abraham Lincoln, we need to bring these guys on board because we can use the manpower. And so this battle at New Market was led by 12 regiments of United States colored troops. They participated, and 14 were awarded the Medal of Honor. 14 black soldiers were awarded the Medal of Honor at the Battle of Chafin. Robert Small commandeered a Confederate ship and sailed into Union territory. Later on, he became a U.S. representative doing Reconstruction, raised a family with one of the educators. Martin Delany was the first black officer on the Union to receive a direct commission as a major. He was a medical guy and went to Harvard, so he was very well educated, but he was the first black to receive a direct commission. And one thing that Dr. Jones-Branch talked about was Harriet Tubman. Now, you remember the movie Glory, right? Yes. And you remember the scene where Colonel Shaw and Colonel Montgomery were going, and Colonel Montgomery said, let's burn down this place, and Colonel Shaw, I'm not gonna do that. This guy actually existed. He was a Jayhawk from Kansas, just like he said. That's who Harriet Tubman helped lead, as Dr. Jones-Branch mentioned about they freed about 700 slaves. That's who that was, Colonel Montgomery, as portrayed in the movie. Now, they didn't show Harriet Tubman in the movie because, just like everything else, it was about a different subject. But that's what happened. It is also believed that Harriet Tubman was the last, she served probably Colonel Shaw's last meal before they had the assault on Fort Wagner. But that's interesting. So a lot of those things, that even though the movie took liberty with certain things, Colonel Montgomery actually existed as a Union officer. Kind of swashbuckler, kind of buck wild, and he believed that secessionists, you need to wipe by the hands of God and all that good stuff. Now, Arkansas's contribution. Once again, remember there were Unionists and there were Loyalists. And yes, all the Confederate states contributed to the Union effort. It wasn't just all Confederate soldiers. Arkansas just contributed the smallest number. Tennessee had something like 15,000 to 20,000 blacks that fought with the Union. Alabama, Kentucky. So all these Confederate states were split, and they also had black troops that ran away, slaves that ran away, and those that joined and fought for the Union. So in the Confederate, you had 48 infantry regiments. Now, for all practical purposes, until everything else, a regiment was only about 1,000 troops. So just keep that in mind. Some of them were less, maybe 900, slightly a little bit more, but just for this briefing, 1,000 troops. So when you see a regiment, just think 1,000 troops. Union, white soldiers. They provided 4 infantry regiments, 4 cavalry regiments, row of horses, 1 artillery battery that shoot cannons, 9,200 troops. This one came out of Arkansas. 6 infantry regiments, 1 artillery battery, a little bit over 5,000 black soldiers served in part of the Union from the state of Arkansas. Arkansas was still considered a wilderness, rural, sparsely populated. Most of the slave population was based along the river, the Mississippi River, and along the Washita and the Saline and the White River. Arkansas in the Civil War was considered a Western front. It was part of the Western theater because that was about as far as you could go, and everything else was Native American territory. This is important right here. Now we're going to bring this to light a little bit. The 46 United States Color Troops. So all these regiments that were in the states of Louisiana, that was from Arkansas, that was from Mississippi, the Bureau of Color Troops redesignated all those units. So that's why you have United States Color Troops. So when you see here, the Arkansas Regiment was first called the 1st Regiment of Arkansas Color, but it became the 46 UST. Organized in Helena, Arkansas. The 54th, organized in Helena, Arkansas. The 56th, organized in St. Louis and came back to Arkansas. And the 57th. And I would talk about the mission. So when they took over Little Rock and they moved the capital down to Washington County, once you go into a territory, you take it, you got to secure it. So most of these troops right here stayed in the state of Arkansas for the most part, protecting what we call the main supply rights. A lot of you cadets understand when we talk about main supply rights, the highway, how you move supplies. So they were doing what we call security force. They really weren't engaged in the enemy like some of the other troops were. They were providing security for here in the state of Arkansas because of the terrain they had already captured. And so those who stayed in Little Rock, once the capital of Little Rock was captured, they provided security for that. First Sergeant Isaac T. Gillum served with the 54. Stayed in Little Rock, became a Little Rock counselor, police officer, jailer, even a coroner. Had recommended to the mayor that this one guy should become a police officer. Police officer had tuberculosis, passed away, was young, and buried right across the cemetery, right across the street right here. Everybody from Brandon Heights and Brandon Mountain know this as Gillum Park. Yeah, I know that. So right now, okay. So right now, Gillum was actually a 1st sergeant in the 54th. He wanted to be a 1st sergeant because he was well educated to read. So blacks could not become officers, but just like in the movie Glory, they become senior enlisted. That's when the character John Morgan was made a command sergeant major. So as 1st Sergeant Isaac T. Gillum, EA, just like Master Sergeant Dunn back there, was a 1st sergeant. And you know the rest is history. But see, when you see these units organized in Little Rock, they provided in Little Rock, they had skirmishes. But their job here were to secure the area and maintain the discipline. So when they weren't maintaining, What do troops do? You train, you do manual jobs, you paint the building, you paint the rocks, you do all those other kinds of things. So that's what these troops did here. Now, you do have some other troops out there in Virginia and Tennessee that was engaged in the enemy. So when a whole war goes on, everybody's going to look at everything. So the reason I say that because now you have a better understanding, what did the Black Union troops do here in Arkansas? They were like a security force for the most part. There were some skirmishes, and the only major battle that took place here is called the Battle of Brig, that's up past Fayetteville, up toward the border. There was a Battle of Bush Creek, that's right near the Clinton Airport. There was a Battle of Pine Bluff. And there was some small skirmishes, the Battle of Potty Plant. So there were skirmishes. They wasn't really like pitched battles. They were just like, throw a rock and then keep on moving. Major General Patrick Cleveland. Why did I mention him? You talk about blacks fighting for the Confederacy. Most of them went because the slaves had to cook them, so they were doing menial jobs like cooking, taking care of stuff, providing support effort. And then in case because some of them didn't know how to read and write, can I take a picture of the uniform out? Sure. Because they don't know better. It's fascinating. Because this is the first war that photos were actually taken. That's the modern technology. That's why you'll see photos of the Mexican War, 1812, because photos and unique and new technology during this time. That's why you have a lot of Civil War photos. So this took place. But he recommended recruiting the black slaves and soldiers to help the fight. So think about this. For those who go to church, those who are in the fraternity, those who are in sorority. You know how you had a meeting and the battles of the general president or the pastor sitting there listening, and a well-respected member steps up and say, let's think about doing this. Now you're going to have the pastor and the president of the pastor, And you're going to have somebody going to say, well, I don't know. And then you're going to have somebody going to say, hell to the no. We ain't doing that. We ain't doing that. I respect you, I got you, but we're not doing that. That's what happened with General Peyton Clyburn. And when I say look at it from a senior military perspective, he was trying to win a war. And what he was doing is, and I used to stir about Alabama, when they played University of Southern California back in 1969 or 70, you remember that? Bear Bryant had an all-white team, but it was still a powerhouse. And the boys from University of Southern California came down there and whooped up on them. And Bear Bryant said, I need to recruit some black guys. This is what Major Cleveland saw. He saw, we need to recruit some of these black soldiers. I see these boys fight, and they do fight. Then somebody said, well, look, if we bring them along to fight, and they win, we can't send them back to slavery, so what's the purpose of having slavery then? So, you know, it was kind of a back and forth routine that went along with this. But anyway, General Patrick Cleveland brought this up because he commanded the Army of Tennessee, highly respected fighter. Now, toward the end of the war, Jefferson Davis and them started thinking like, you know what, Major Cleveland pretty had a good idea there. We need to look at that. What do you think about that, General Lee? Well, yeah, because we got a lot of deserters and we need the manpower. But it was a little bit too late for the Confederate Army. And once again, I'm looking at this from a military perspective, people, okay? Doesn't make a difference. Because you try to win a war the best way you can. That's why you have General Dunn lay this out. So what took place? 4th of March, Lincoln's second inauguration. 9 April, General Lee surrendered his army to General Grant. Lee's allowed to keep his sidearm and General Lee his horse. Then 14 April, President Lincoln was assassinated at age 57. Now what brought that on? Let me go back to this right here. This right up here, to Georgia, this is General Sherman's barge to the sea. And his purpose was to destroy Atlanta, and destroy Georgia, and destroy the Confederate South, and all their supplies, and break their will to fight. But once again, that's what a general does. I want to break the enemy's will to fight, by any means necessary, and war is very brutal. And he did that. He went to Atlanta and destroyed Atlanta. Now he's fighting people that he went to West Point with. One of these guys that got killed was a Union general named General McPherson. General McPherson died in his war right here, and both generals on both sides mourned his loss. But what happened? A post in Atlanta was named after him in 1885 called Fort McPherson. I served as part of the 3rd Army. What is Fort McPherson now? Tyler Perry Studios. Now, my wife will hate me for saying this, because I cannot watch a Tyler Perry movie and say, that's Fort McPherson right there. He just saw on this side of the building. and then he went and shot on this side of the building like they out downtown. When you shut up and what do? Every time I see Falcon Grace, Tyler Perry's booth, I see the general's house, the general Foley's house you live in, they show it, they make it look like a neighborhood. I'm like, you should run them down the street. But Fort McNair is Tyler Perry's studio now. And I was stationed there for 3 years when I was in Atlanta. So anyway, General Sherman broke the back of Georgia and gave Abraham Lincoln a Christmas present. Why? Because Abraham Lincoln was saying, I'm about to lose, and the North are getting tired of fighting. We don't do anything to win. George McClellan, who was one of the generals he sacked at first, was running against him. George McClellan was willing to negotiate the compromise with the South. And Lincoln needed something to win, and so Sherman gave him an early Christmas present. And once he did that, the South was crumbled. So anyway, Lincoln was assassinated in April 14th. No, the 22nd USCT. They took part in a funeral procession for President Lincoln. Also, in the hunt for John Wilkes Booth, the 22nd USCT took part in that as well. John Wilkes Booth was on the hunt for like 12 days, was on the lane for like 12 days before they caught him. They didn't catch him, but they were part of the unit that was in the hunt for him. Now, going on to the Buffalo Soldiers. The Civil War, United States colored troops were not Buffalo soldiers. So after the war, what took place, just like everything else, the South came back, signed the decree, and, got together again. And they deactivated all the USCT and drew down the army. Also, in the official record of this war right here, that's presented by the U.S. Congress, it's called the War Rebellion. That's where the U.S. government lists this whole conflict as the War Rebellion. That's an official document, the way it describes everything between the South and the North. It's called the War Rebellion. But anyway, the Buffalo Soldiers. Remember when I say this band all the USCT? So they came up with 2 regiments of the 9th and 10th Cavalry, and there were actually going to be 4 regiments of the infantry, but they narrowed it down to 2. So you see where one was organized, the 9th Cavalry in New Orleans, Louisiana. 10th Cavalry was organized at Fort Leavenworth, and as they call it, the 24th Colored Infantry organized at Fort Clark, and then the 25th organized in Jackson Barracks. Their job was now, since the U.S. was moving out west, to go out and continue the Indian War that we was going through. So now we got through the Civil War, we went through this almost divorce, the South came back, we reunited, kumbaya sort of. So now let's go westward and try to expand our territory. And yes, they fought the Cheyenne, the Comanche, the Apache, and all other Native American tribes. And the reason the Buffalo name came across, and there always was some discussion about it, but you gotta remember, the Indians had never seen black people before. And there wasn't no grooming stand back then because you just didn't cut your hair every day because there wasn't a barber there, and plus it got cold. And so when the Indians kind of looked at them and saw them, they said they looked like the Buffalo Soldiers. And just like anybody grows up in the hood, you're gonna wind up with a nickname of some kind. Okay? And so the term Buffalo Soldiers stood. So the Buffalo Soldiers did not fight in the Civil War. The name did not come until after the Civil War. And so they also helped build roads, escorted mail carriers, guarded Indian reservations, and they also performed as park rangers. Before we had park rangers the way you know them now, a lot of Union soldiers acted the role of park rangers when they established that. 13 enlisted, 6 also were awarded the Medal of Honor throughout the Indian Wars. Then that was the Spanish American War, the Battle of San Juan Hill. This is when Lieutenant Colonel Theodore Roosevelt and his Rough Riders kind of rolled hard. Then you had the 1899 Philippine-American War. Then you had the Mexican expedition. Mexicans were kind of like, you know what, can we go back and take Texas again? Okay, it didn't work out too well for them. But anyway, Buffalo Soldiers participated in all these campaigns here. Now, Dr. Jones-Branch talked about Kathleen Williams. Very good background on her. That's a photo up there. But this was the first cadet, Henry O'Flipper, to attend West Point and graduate. Now, West Point wasn't as big as it is now, so the graduating class was no more than maybe 65 or 70 cadets every year, unlike about 900 cadets who graduate and commission now. So West Point was not that big back then. So the whole West Point was probably more about 350 students attending. So yes, he was isolated, he was very smart, and just like today, he was nominated by a congressional leader. Now, what's interesting is, it's the second guy who went to West Point is from Helena, Arkansas. Didn't know that, did you? His dad was a justice of the peace, the first black justice of the peace from Helena, well educated. He went to Wilberforce, not him, but Alexander went to Wilberforce College for a while, no, Oberlin College for a while. Then he got appointed to West Point. But he got sick and died in his early 30s. The second point is Charles Young. Now, Charles Young was kind of a robust guy. Alexander was like a class ahead of him, so they kind of hung together. Charles Young kind of was able to speak like several different languages, so he was able to talk to the Health and Spoke German a little bit. But he also became the first black colonel in the United States Army. He was also the first black park superintendent out of the Sequoia National Park out there in California. So once again, I say Buffalo Soldiers are what, like park rangers, right? And so that's what took place with them. So he took all this. However, during World War I, he could not get a command, and then he got sick in Liberia and died, and they left him buried for a year before the U.S. government brought him back and gave him full military honor. So here's the first black colonel. If you look at the West Point, you see the uniform doesn't change that much. You look at Henry O. Flipper, uniform is still the same. Plus, he got some good hair too. Y'all got good hair. Now, John J. Persian. Why did I bring up John J. Persian? Very unique relationship. He was a West Point cadet, but his first assignment was the Buffalo Soldiers. And he was a stern disciplinarian. And so what took place, because of the way he was structured, you know, most of you guys in the military, you know they're hard, charging off, just like this ain't gonna cut no slack on nothing. So when he got to West Point as an instructor, the white cadets didn't really like him, because he was hard. So they referred to him as Negro Jack. And that's the best I can say right now. Okay? But that's the truth. I can see it in, you can see it in the museum up there in Fort Bliss. That was true, because they didn't like him. But it became Salt, it became Blackjack, and then they stuck with him. Well, General Pershing was the one who commanded all U.S. forces during World War I, and he rose to the rank, originally was called General of the Army, which is really like a 6-star position, but he wore 4 gold bars to distinguish him from the rest of the general officers, but he never did put on 6 stars. And Congress never did really officially approve that. But what happened was, he outranked General George Washington. So when the 20th anniversary of our country, Congress passed a law that, hey man, Persian outranked George Washington. So they promoted George Washington over Persian. So for all you cadets, George Washington is our most senior general of the Army, of the military, period. Okay, that's how they came across. That's why I put him up there. Because also, you guys have heard of Persian rifles, right? Okay, he ran a drill doing ROTC instruction at one of the colleges. So he had a drill team that performed very sharply. And that's where you get the Persian rifle that's pretty much predominant on some HBCUs in time. So it's named after him when you talk about Persian rifle. It's named for General Blackjack Persian. All right? Now, Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. was the next West Point graduate. Long after Charles Young had graduated in 1889, they didn't have another West Point graduate until 1996. And as you know, he was the commander of the Tuskegee Airmen, and he went on to become the first black Air Force general and the first to make 3 stars. The Great War. You see the uniforms are changing. Let me apologize to everybody. I forgot this gentleman's name from Pine Bluff that was awarded a Silver Star. It just kind of slipped my mind, but forgive me, that's just one merit. There's just one merit, but okay. Now, look at the U.S. It's 142 years old. Arkansas is 82 years old. Look at the population and look at Little Rock's population. U.S. Standing Army, 125. Blacks are still barred from the U.S. Marine. Many of roles in the U.S. Navy that were written by the other 2 speakers before me. But still, Fort Warren was one of the many segregated camps that commissioned over 600 black officers as captains and lieutenants. And then other places also did a commission ceremony. Arkansas's contribution to World War I. This is what I found fascinating about it. In 1917, this very organization that I'm standing on the stage right now donated $100,000 in Liberty bonds. And then the school I went to, Scipio A. Jones, the last year was open as a junior senior high school. I went there in 1970, played the band, got my butt beat by Mr. Beaver. That pissed me off. Because, my dad said, well, you should have known better. But anyway, Scipio A. Jones was a renowned Little Rock attorney during his time period, just like the late attorney John Walker. And he donated, he didn't donate, but he was in a check of $50,000 to the U.S. Treasury Secretary towards the support of the war effort. Now, the war was actually from 1914 to 1918. The U.S. did not enter the war until 1917. Buffalo soldiers did not participate in that war. They sent them back west down the Mexican border, stayed down there, so they never participated in World War I. So they developed new units. The 92nd Infantry Division, color unit, that's their motto, deeds not words. Now, just for practical purpose, back then the Infantry Division was about 14,000 soldiers. Just so you have an idea of how this looked. 14,000 soldiers were part of the 92nd Infantry Division. They took part in Meuse-Argonne. You see the number of caps they had. And they served along the French after the British what? Refused to have them. Now here's the thing about the British and French. Remember I said they were involved with us in the American Revolutionary War, the Civil War? Now we're already trying to get they behind. Now the British and the French, we call it the British and the French and the European. The American leadership thinks the blacks can't fight, and the British and the French think the Americans can't fight. So the crap is running downhill. Okay? And so, since the British and the Americans didn't want them, the French say, yeah, we'll take it. So the 92nd and the 93rd Division served under the French. And so those are some of the things that took place. Now, the 93rd Division, model of the blue helmet, they didn't fight the whole division. So in other words, they took this half and gave it to this French division, took this half, gave it to this French division, and took the other people on the top and gave it to this French division. So they didn't fight as a whole team. But then, the French say, these boys can fight. So you look at what happened. Cited 11 times for bravery, decorated with the French Croix de Jour with a silver star. And you see how these guys came out, distinguished service cross. So the boys could fight and prove themselves in combat. Continue on. And that was Allied forces. So what happened? The war ended on the 11th day of the 11th month at the 11th hour in the Great War in 1918. Now, a couple of trivial things I forgot to mention. During the Civil War, President Lincoln had proposed to make Thanksgiving the last Thursday of November. And he did that to try to bring the nation together and try to cohort the South and coming back, but he's still trying to do that until it was officially established and it became a paid federal holiday. But Thanksgiving was kind of celebrated kind of in and out a little bit. But Lincoln's the one that proposed that let's do it on the last Thursday in November. Also, President Grant is the one that made Christmas official holiday in 1870. Then that's when Mason had the first Santa Claus in 1870. At the end of the Spanish-American War, this other organization, new organization called the Veterans of Foreign Wars was established, that some members are probably members of right now. Okay? At the end of this war, another veterans organization was started in Paris. You guys know it as American Legion. Now, when you look at the U.S. casualties, 116 battle deaths, 53,000 killed in action. And look how many diseases took them out, 63,000. Okay, now technology is moving forward. You know, we think we got peace, a lot of things happening in the peacetime army. You know, the U.S. has expanded, right? So now, 1940, the U.S. was 164 years old, Arkansas was what, 104? Look at the population and look at how we're growing. So what you watch is how you get your little kid, you put them on this thing right here, you measure how high he gets. This is my way of measuring how the United States grew. So it involved the majority of the world's country, the Allies with Great Britain, France, and Soviet Union, actually with Germany, Italy, and Japan. When I served with the Italian Carabinieri down in Bosnia and Herzegovina, I asked him, I said, so what do y'all think of Mussolini? Well, he was okay, he got the train run on time, he did this, but then he started hanging around Hitler, and then he just got greedy. And I was like, oh, okay, look, we know we got our asses whacked and handed to us and everything, but we would have been okay if he would have hung around Hitler. I was like, oh, okay, so that's how y'all look at it. So anyway, 16 million servicemen was fallen. So our army today, not our army, but our military today has 2.1 million people. There was the army back then in 1940. It grew to 11 million people. But look at the population, 132 million. That's why the World War II is always considered the greatest generation, because you had somebody from every part of the United States that served, because you had a large population, you had a small population, but a large military. When you think about 16 million people serving, so look how the Army grew in 1940, and look how it grew over the next 4 years. Can you imagine that happening in today's society? That means all you guys on the age of 35 will be gone. Now, in 1940, there was only 4,000 blacks in the peacetime army and only 12 black officers. And this is how many black soldiers, citizens decided to join up. Almost close to 1 million African Americans decided to join up with the World War II effort. But still, blacks were barred from the Marines, and black ones served, as mentioned earlier, as messmen and stewards. A total of 407,000 Americans were killed during World War II. So you look at the Army and Air Force. The Air Force was part of the Army. It was called the Army Air Force. It wasn't called the United States Air Force. It was part of the Army, so it was referred to as the Army Air Force. Now look at the enlisted pay on average, $71 per month. Officers was about $203, but this is the way everything works. So a 4-star general was only getting about like $700 a month from 1940. Just a little trivia, just a little trivia. Now, something that Dr. Jones-Branch talked about was the Women's Army Corps, and she talked about certain things. So this is the number that went in. And one thing that she alluded to, but here's a fact, Army Nurse Corps, only 500 black women were allowed to serve. So once they hit 500, that was it. Now she also talked about the 688, and she had everything on there. But I also let you know that we're on the same shit in music, okay? Now for the Army, once again you had the 92nd Infantry Division and the 93rd Infantry Division. The 92nd fought in the Italian campaign on the 5th Army. I found this doing my research about Private Rudy Johnson. In 2018, his remains were returned to Arkansas. I think in the year 2018, if I'm mistaken about that, if I'm correct about that rather. The 93rd Infantry Division fought in the Pacific Theater in Guadalcanal. The Red Ball Express. The Red Ball Express was really this big FedEx, UPS, massive convoy going up and down, I-40 to deliver supplies to the troops, to Patton's 3rd Army and to Hodges' 1st Army. And you heard about the 761st Tank Battalion. In fact, Green Majul Dubar wrote a book about them. And he talked about them and asked and said, what do y'all think of Patton? Well, the one Patton account, those are attitudes of back then. But they followed on Patton's 3rd Army, they were proud of it. No more just like saying, did you take the Tom Brady's Patriots? But one Tom Brady, we still play the Tom Brady's Patriots. And we good about that, we cool about that. So these guys, in their 80s and 90s, gave Kareem a hard time because he really wanted to say, well, did y'all like not fight for Patton? Y'all didn't like this? No, we like being part of Patton's 3rd Army. He was the most aggressive commander that the U.S. had out of all the field armies we had. He didn't believe in taking prisoners. He just believed in blitzkrieg, just keep punching away. In fact, I read about several books about Patton anyway. That's one of the senior leaders I do read about, besides Napoleon, MacArthur, and a few other people. So anyway, they earned about 300 Purple Hearts. 1,700 black soldiers were part of known in the beachland, but they drove most of the not the aircraft, but the watercraft that brought soldiers aboard. And they also helped clear the minefield once soldiers got on board, on the beachhead to start pushing forward. George Washington was awarded the Medal of Honor in the Pacific Theater. When the ship got torpedoed, he saved about several other people before he disappeared, drowned. No, black MPs stationed in the South could not enter a restaurant for German prisoners were being served. Yeah, black soldiers from the North, when they got down South, they're like, wow, we're not used to this. They never showed deference to the local population while staying in the South, so they also provided some tension. The Tuskegee Airmen. First all-black flying squadron, they flew in North Africa and Sicily. After they paid their tails, they became known as the Red Tails, just like their nickname. They were commanded by Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. And then he also went on to command the 332nd Fighter Group. Also for the Navy, had a thing called the Golden 13. And just like was mentioned in the previous lecture, they didn't allow black to serve as commissioned officers. And so once President Roosevelt decided to go ahead and pass his executive order banning discrimination, this was brought this about. Samuel Gravely was commissioned 8 months later after the Golden 13 and became the first black flag officer retired as a vice admiral, which was a 3-star. Dory Miller. Now you heard the Secretary of the Navy say that the next USS aircraft would be called the USS Dory Miller. Okay? Yeah, good thing. So all the things. Well, the thing about Doris Miller, he was a good old country boy, came from Texas, played a little football, loved the squirrel hunt, man his own heart. And the reason his name was Doris because the midwife was sure that it was going to be a girl. She thought it was going to be a girl, so that's why his name is Doris. But anyway, you see him about 6'3", 200 pounds, and so he was aboard the first Navy Cross by Admiral Nimitz right here. And 2 years later, he died because the ship Liscon Bay was sunk by a Japanese submarine. He was only 24 years old, so that means he must have earned the Silver Star when he was like 21 or 22. But Doris Miller was only 24 years old. Not bad for a young kid to have a ship named after him like this. Now the Marines. The Marines finally opened up. They finally opened up, and they had what is called Moffett Point, where they trained a lot of Marine officers. And this was the main unit that fought in the Pacific. The Marines pretty much fought in the Pacific. The Marines did not fight in the European theater. It was pretty much an Army Air Force. The Pacific was pretty much a Navy, Marine with Army support. Brigadier General Benjamin Davis Sr. was the first black general, but he didn't make general until like his 41st year. So he was a general for a long time. He thought he'd probably get the command of the 92nd or 93rd, but the Army just wouldn't give it to him. He pretty much formed in an EO capacity while he was at the Pentagon. But his son, Benjamin Davis Jr. West Point, remember I mentioned him, Tuskegee Airman, went on to make 3 stars. And then later on, I forgot the year, but the Clinton administration promoted him to 4-star. And then his retirement. So General Benjamin Davis is actually a 4-star. He passed away about several years ago. Lieutenant Jackie Robinson. Lieutenant Jackie Robinson, as you know, went to UCLA, played football, ran track, but he also enlisted in the Army. So what took place? He was down in Fort Mill, Texas, in his uniform, riding another officer, and the bus driver told him to go to the back of the bus. Jackie Robinson said no. That caused problems. So the bus driver had him arrested when he got to the stop. And so what else took place? Took him arrested, wanted his commander from the 761st to bring charges on Jackie for disorderly conduct, doing this, drunkenness, and everything else. And Jackie said, I don't drink. So they got trumped up charges. And his commander, who was a white lieutenant colonel, refused to press charges. So what they did, they sent him to the 758 battalion to his other commander to say, press charges. And he did. But he was acquitted, and they sent him to installation in Kentucky to coach Army athletics. And that's where he met a young man who said, why don't you go try for the Negro League when you get out? So Jackie Robinson got his honorable discharge, and as you guys know, the rest is history. Now, this last bullet. Charles McGee, he's 100 years old. He's a Tuskegee Airman. He celebrated his 100th birthday about two months ago. Both houses of Congress had just passed legislation and law to promote him to general at age 100. So it hasn't came in the news yet, but it has passed both the House and the Senate to get him promoted to general. Now, there's another gentleman that played with the 614th Tank Destroyer Battalion, whose birthday is today, and I was asked to be a part of that, but I was missed here. So another one of my fellow peers, Major General Chern, is doing that for me down in Virginia. And he turned 100 years old today, as a matter of fact. Now, 1945, President Roosevelt inaugurated 20 January, went his 4th term. So President Roosevelt had already served close to 12 years in office. And he just got elected to his 4th term. So had he completed and lived, he would have had 16 years in office. But you see the dates. He got inaugurated 20 January after he got elected to a 4th term. Then he died 12 April at age 63. Remember I was talking about Benito Mussolini that was hanging around Hitler? Well, the Italians got tired of that, so they executed and hung him and his mistress in 28 April, age 61. Then Germany, Hitler said, okay, this is over, I'm done. So he committed suicide with him and his wife, 30 April. So you look at all these events that took place in April. And have you noticed that between that and Lincoln, there's a lot of events take place in April. Finally, Germany surrenders. So U.S. had this thing called Manhattan Project, and Japan were fighting like the devil. They did not give up. So the U.S. dropped a nuclear bomb on them in Hiroshima. Some people say Hiroshima or Hiroshima. Japan is kind of like, so? Okay. So the U.S. said, we'll drop another one. Then Japan said, okay, we give. We quit. And so, Fat Man and Little Boy, those are the names of 2 nuclear bombs that were dropped on Japan, and Japan surrendered in the World War II. Korean War. Once again, you look at the 1950 U.S. is 174 years old, Arkansas. Now, Korea was actually a colony of Japan. And so now the Cold War starts, so now the U.S. is a big boy now. Remember how the French didn't think the U.S. could fight? They didn't think they thought like that about us in World War II. But now we're the big boys on the block now. We are a superpower. Make no mistake about it. The Soviet Union has risen up too a little bit. So now we take Korea. Soviet Union now supports North Korea, we support South Korea. North Korea is a socialist state, South Korea is a capitalist state. This guy right here, where is that? Kim Il-sung, that's granddad to the guy that's there now. This is his grandfather. So this is a legacy. So it passed down from the grandfather to the son, down to the grandson. Okay? So that's the one that the current administration deals with now, is the grandson. But this guy was the one who had it all first. And neither side backed down. They thought they were the right heir to the being Korea. So that's how the war started. However, it lacked the global attention of World War II. So you had young men like Carl Hines and other guys that were kind of like between 19 to maybe 25 that fought in Korea. Now Korea was a bloody battle too. Now, remember when I talked about the Buffalo Soldiers? This was the last regiment to desegregate and go away. A couple of things about Korean War. Lieutenant Jesse Brown, the first black Navy airman to die. Colonel Samuel Pierce. Those of you old enough to remember, he was on President Reagan's cabinet as the Secretary of HUD during Reagan's both terms. Charles Branch was a former U.S. rep, got a Bronze Star and Purple Heart. Okay, people, this is not Mayor Charles Bussey. I knew y'all gonna say that. This is not Mayor Charles Bussey, so don't start picking at me now, because Charles Bussey served in World War II. Not the same person, I'm telling you guys. I've been in the Pentagon enough, I know how to double check this. So I looked up like, I didn't know he was in Korea. I said, you know, I better get this right, because now it looks like I'm gonna hang you for this. So, but no, this is a different Charles Bussey. So he was awarded the Civil Star for having to kill over 250 enemy combatants. But as you see now how the U.S. has kind of evolved now, from being an all-segregated unit, to now we become more integrated. So all these firsts are starting to disappear, and all the segregation is starting to disappear now. So the Battle of Heartbreak Ridge, the one that Clint Eastwood made a movie about, actually existed, but it was fought by Army. This is the first time use of jet fighters during the Korean War. At that time, the Air Force had 25 black pilots and integrated fighting units. So you can see the first is starting to disappear a little bit. Daniel Chapman James was a Cessna fighter, became the first black four-star general in his service in 1964, 74. And then in the Marine Corps, Lieutenant Frank Peterson was the first black Marine Corps pilot and the first black general in 1979, retiring as a 3-star. He passed away about 3 years ago. So more than 600,000 African Americans served, but estimated 5,000 died in combat. These two soldiers were awarded the Medal of Honor. Stateside, we had the triple nickel parachute infantry, all black, but they never saw any action. Now, the war by North Korea was called the Fatherland Liberation War. China called it the war to resist American aid Korea. We call it a police action. So you got three different things. You know, the Super Bowl, World Championship, or game. So now we're going to Vietnam. So now Carl Hines came back and he raised a family. Carl is growing up and everything, and everybody else coming in there with DC, you know, Yvette, and then Dwayne, I hung around with. And so this is taking place. So you see the U.S. population in 1960 and how old the U.S. was in Arkansas. This is the number of casualties Arkansas suffered throughout the Vietnam War. States like California, New York, and Illinois suffered tremendous war casualties, up to maybe 4,000, killed over a period of time. There were no segregated units by race, but the Army WAC still existed. Black soldiers were 12% of the U.S. troops. Over 20 received Medal of Honor for their action in Vietnam. And out of the 58,000 that died, 7,200 of them were black. More 6,900 were Army Marines, and you can understand why it was a ground offensive. So things are changing. So you don't have a lot of segregation that's going on right now. But we got a lot of tension. But Major General Frederick Davidson was the first black to command the Infantry Brigade and also the first black to command the Army Division. Now, Army Division at those times was normally about 15,000 to 17,000, depending on what they were doing. He did not command the division in Vietnam, he commanded the division in Germany. Project 100,000 was this initiative by the Secretary of Defense, McNamara, to lift people out of poverty, mostly men, but it proved that a lot of blacks would sign up for this. Because one, they wanted to pay, and two, they didn't mind sign up for combat duty until about 1967 when all the tensions and everything between Stokely Carmichael and Martin Luther King started coming into more prominence about certain things. But also, in Vietnam, they had a stockade called Long Binh Jail, or LBJ. So can you imagine a war zone, and you're in the stockade too? You're in prison? Because a lot of bad things were going on. A lot of bad things were going on. And they had a prison uprising in Vietnam as well too. And you can see major racial problems. But the thing about it, and talking to some soldiers, like, when you got in a firefight, it didn't make a difference. But this guy had a Confederate flag, and you was on the back power sign, you were trying to survive. You want to survive and live. So once a firefight started, that went out the window. Now, once again, Otis Redding, y'all remember sitting on the dock of the bay? Well, the big thing before then was that Otis Redding died in a plane crash going to a concert in Wisconsin. And that song came out after it crashed. And that was the biggest thing that people were talking about then. And then until President Johnson decided not to seek re-election, that newscast said, "I shall not accept, nor I seek the nomination of my party for another term as president." That took place on 31 March. Look what happened on 4 April. And then by that, look what happened on 6 June. Now, Vietnam was a deadly war. So the deadly week in Vietnam, over 443 soldiers were killed in 1 week. The deadliest year, 6,500. Now let me explain something to you from a military perspective that the society can sustain right now. You think the society can sustain, on the news with David Morrow, last week, 240 U.S. soldiers were killed. Last week before that, 250 soldiers were killed. We average almost 240 soldiers a week killed in action every week that Walter Cronkite was presented to the news. And when he said it was the lowest total of the week, it was like 175. Can you imagine our society dealing with that now? That's how we got to 58,000. The U.S. was averaging about 250 soldiers a week being killed in action. That's a lot. So anyway, the war ends, and another thing. Nixon inaugurated for a second term, 20 January. President Johnson dies 22 January at age 64. Then Nixon signed the peace accord in 27 January. Persian Gulf. Now we're in Dr. Jones-Branch territory that she gave a story about. Now one thing about this, she is just one of many soldiers that tell their own personal story of what they went through. There are a lot of stories out there. Like her, some people do videos, some people write books, some people just tell their story. So there are a lot of stories out there about what took place. But anyway, the Gulf War. Once again, there was Operation Desert Shield to build up, and then Desert Storm combat operations. The whole process lasted 6 months, over 700,000 U.S. troops. But you look at the number, 292 killed in action. There's nothing compared to Vietnam, nothing compared to Korea, nothing compared to World War I or World War II. General Colin Powell became the youngest chairman at age 52 as a 4-star. So, ladies and gentlemen, that completes General Dunn's briefing. There was a group of men called Imperial Social Club that my dad used to be a part of. And so when they came to the promotion ceremony, I said, "Are you coming in to wash and ring?" They said, "No, we're going to Manassas." I said, "Manassas is an airstrip." I said, "How you gonna find to Manassas?" "Oh, we got a private charter." By who? By Stephen King. Stephen King gave the Imperial Social Club, Stephen King, the big building in downtown, gave him a charter plane to come to my promotion ceremony. Well, this is what I would share with you. I put together notes, and I have been doing my historical background because my father served in the Air Force, and there's a lot of people out here that served in the Air Force during the 1950 time frame. And my grandfather served in World War II. And so I've been putting together my notes, and so the thing to answer your question is, I just got to do it. And I think this right here, because I really worked my hand off on it. I thought I was in Pentagon briefing. I was in Pentagon briefing. And for those of you who've been to my house, and y'all see my man cave down there, it was like an operations center. I had World War II over here, I had Korea over here, I had stuff going on. My wife come out, "What the hell?" And so So I was like, man, don't disturb me now, I'm working. Like, I'll be over here like, okay, I got this for real. Wait, let me go back to the Civil War and listen right there. I'm writing stuff down. This whole time out. General Dunn, when you get your briefing done? Ma'am, I'll be there shortly. So I made friends with the Little Rock Library, you know, I stayed into her clothes and stuff. General Dunn, we need your briefing now. And then she was federal. But Dr. Jones-Branch already got her stuff in. You know. And then my boys are like, Dunn, what you doing? Man, I'm working on briefing. Man, how long you been working on briefing, man? And you do have my permission to put it out there on video. Yeah, as long as we meet all the legal obligations, you can post this as well. Are there any other questions?
All right.
It's been very important, especially as an officer. And I will tell you one story one time. When General Walker was the adjutant general for the state of Arkansas, for the Arkansas Guard, I was called to sit on some board work. And so I sat on board work, and I know that there was certain age groups that weren't taking their PT test. I'm like, how are you going to keep these people in the military? They haven't taken their PT test. Well, General Dunn, you know, once you get over a certain age right here, you don't have to take a PT test. I'm like, oh, really? So I called down, talked to my command sergeant, made it first. So I said, look, when is the age cutoff? And they gave me the age cutoff. I said, well, why the hell have I been doing my PT test? So they said, well, sir, you all hard charged and who, and the soldiers liked the fact you ran with and took your PT test, and we thought it would offend you. We said that you didn't have to. So I said, oh, okay, all right, cool. So, but no, physical fitness is very important because the Marines and the Army and the rest of the service is a physical activity. And so you have to stay physically fit to keep your mind sharp. And you have to stay that because of the nature of the business, especially within the Army and the Marine Corps. Not to say the other services don't do it, but it's men in the military is a physical activity. And you have to be physically fit and mentally fit. So yes, I stayed running, you know, I was able to do it. And as I got older, I was still knock out about like 55 to 60 push-ups. I was still doing like 60 sit-ups, and I could still run 2 miles in about maybe 17 minutes. But I was just doing it just to stay sharp. That means I would run almost close to 8-minute mile. But I wasn't trying to make no record and do like 15 minutes. But then I got mad when I found I didn't have to do that. I was like, really? But soldiers like to see their leaders out in front, and these are retired general officers will tell you that. They like to see their leaders out in front. So I always try to make sure that led, as you say, by example. And I set the tone in dress, in professionalism, and in courtesy, and trying to do what's always right, even when nobody else is looking. So people tell you that when I went to Cumberland News Radio, y'all flag is out of order. I did. So anyway, to answer your question, though, physical fitness is very important for the mind because you want to stay competitive, and you want to make sure that your mind is sharp.
Sir, could you address ROCKS real quick?
Yeah, the ROCKS is a mentorship organization that originated in Washington, D.C. by a group of officers in the early 70s that was at not West Point, but Leavenworth. And when they got to the Pentagon, they found out they didn't really have any mentorship to show them the ropes and stuff. So they formed this organization called the Blue Geese. And the Blue Geese was kind of like a mentorship program that they kind of taught each other the ropes of how the Pentagon worked. Well, that was one star general named Roscoe, I forgot his last name. But his name was Rock, they called him Rock. And so him and his wife died in a plane crash coming from their daughter's graduation. I can't remember the exact date. And so they named the group the Rock. But the Rock is a mentorship organization that helps young officers across the service to navigate. And so we need to reach out to somebody like, hey sir, I have this issue, I have this question. How do I do this? And so I do reach out, I still mentor some people. I've had about 2 colonels that have made general officers since then, not say that they made it because of me, but they always had, General Dunn, can I ask your counsel, can I seek your counsel? And I always provided that. And so the ROCKS provides a mentorship program for officers, depending on what level they at. And so we have a program that's very active in the Washington, D.C. area. They have chapters at Fort Hood, overseas, and other places, locations. Well, to answer that question right here, I'll say this. The senior leaders that work at the Joint Staff, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, are the ones that deal with the command, the National Command Authorities. For you lieutenants, for you cadets that will become lieutenants, you support and serve the Constitution of the United States. That's your first priority. In other words, you don't worry about stuff above your level. You take care of those soldiers at your level, you make sure that they train and ready to fight and execute the mission, no matter where you go. That's your first priority. Now, to answer George's question about me as a general officer, I pretty much stay apolitical. Most of my close friends will tell you that General Dunn doesn't really talk that much politics. Okay? Some generals can, And some generals do, but I just choose to enjoy my life and just help when I can. And I just kind of watch the political stream. That way people don't know which way I go. I just walk straight down the narrow path. So to answer your question, Georgia, you know, that's just up to those who, how they look at it. I just kind of keep that out of what I like to do. Well, that was available in the Congress, and Congress has to make that decision. And based on today's construct of the way the American society is right now, I'm not going to say it would work. It would have to be a catastrophic event that we'd have to go into a draft mindset. It really has to be something that's, you know, catastrophic. You know, a meltdown of the grid or anything like that. But as far as that, I do not see us bringing back the draft because the volunteer army or the volunteer military is working pretty good. So to answer that question, it would have to be something so dramatic that we have no choice but to bring back the draft because we would need able-bodied people. And yes, they have the basis, and yes, they will draft women. Do not go in there with the idea that you're going to make general. Go in there with the idea that you're going to do the job. Do the job first. So what if you do as a second lieutenant, when you get a platoon or a detachment, that's your primary focus. Then if you get promoted to lieutenant, which, you know, should happen, you know, as long as you walk and chew gum and don't, you know, trip nobody. And once you make the rank of captain, you continue to do your job. Some of you will go and get company command time. And that's where you're going to start, you know, developing your leadership skills and how to manage large organizations and how to do the right thing. But you also learn from your NCOs how to distance soldiers and how to take a mission. And so as you move up the rank, certain things will start to happen. And it depends. And to answer your question, a lot of people say, well, what does it take to make general? You have to be in for a long time. And this is the best way I can caveat it. It's like going from college football to the pros. You don't have to play for University of Arkansas to make pro, or University of Alabama. You can make pro come from University of Pine Bluff. Just like that kicker, nobody thought about that kicker, but what is he doing now? He's in the pro. Okay? So that's the way it is with general officers. There are certain things they can select, and when they select you, they will tell you there are about 7 other colonels you could have selected. But we selected you. Now everybody that makes general is not going to make 4-star. Those are your paid managers, Tom Brady, you know. Those guys move up there, but that's not to say you're not going to have a successful career. Okay, so the answer to your question is, that's what you focus in on first. Don't put down, I mean, you want to put down your first goal to make general, that is fine. But don't go on the idea that, well, you know, my dad was general, so I'm going to make general too, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to write school, and I got the right assignment. No. Learn to do your job. And then everything else will follow. And if that doesn't happen, and you get out, become a good citizen. Just become a good citizen. Okay? Because unlike joining a gang or something like that, you can get out here. You can get out with benefits. But the answer to this question is, there were just certain challenges, and I would say that when it came clear to me is when I came out of command out of Korea, and I was going to the Joint Chief of Staff. The military calls it the Joint Staff. I say the Joint Chief of Staff because that's what everybody recognizes. And so you had to be nominated as a colonel to go to the Joint Staff from the services. They looked at your records, said, okay, you got all the qualifications, you go. And I never forget when I went there, I ran into this black Navy captain, which is like a colonel. And he said, where you heading to? I said, look, I'm trying to get around to the National Military Command Center in Bacon. He said, oh, you getting ready to make dinner? I said, no, I don't think so. He said, you coming out of command? I said, yeah. You coming out, going out to the Joint Staff? Into the J3 and the direct operation? I said, yeah. He said, you probably gonna make dinner. I said, okay, if you think so. And like we say, the rest is history. Well, I think in anything that happens, and once again, I use a sports analogy. There are people who have played football all their life, and all they do is they make it to the college level, they never make it pro. Some people make pro and only last one year. Then some people last 10 years. You know, attrition just happens just because of just the nature of human nature. So it doesn't just really say that, okay, you're gonna run the challenges. I ran the challenges myself too. I'm not gonna say I didn't run the challenges. Dow friends of mine ran the challenges, but they weren't able to survive. They got the military, or they got kicked out the military. And some of them were some good officers too. So it's just human nature. And the stuff I went through from the 80s on up too, is not gonna be the same challenge that you guys go through, nor is it gonna be the same challenge that Carl Hine went through, nor is it gonna be the same challenge that even Dr. Jones-Branch went through. Each generation is going to be different. Just like in the Civil War, in World War I and II, I tried to explain that to you, every generation is going to have a different challenge. You guys are going to have a different challenge. And one thing I would tell you guys, Twitter is not your first sergeant. Facebook is not your sergeant major. Do not put your problems out there on social media. Or my boss sucks. Okay? Now that's one thing I would share with you. You don't put that like, my company commander sucks like crap. You put it out there, it's out there, okay? Yeah, I have some company commanders, but you can talk about that in the office club or something like that over a beer. We didn't talk about that on social media. So that's one thing I would say to you about, watch what you do. But you gotta learn how to manage people. You gotta learn how to manage people, because people will make the service work. And you as a trusted leader by these professors of military science have put this together to show you how leadership works, okay? And like I say, only 1% make the rank of general. That's why I say, going from general like going from college to pro. Who would have thought Scotty Pitt would have came out of UCA and did what he did? Who would have thought that Derek Fisher would have came out of ULR and did what he did? Because it's like, well, he didn't come from the Ohio State, Dr. Jones-Branch. You can't say the Ohio State. But what I'm saying is, it's kind of like that because people come from different backgrounds and they make it. But once you make it, you are a pro and you expect to do what's right. Now, I will share this with you. Even though General Clark wasn't able to come, General Clark and I had an office call about 2 days ago, which was supposed to be like 30 minutes. And we sat down and talked for like an hour and a half. We talked about everything from Bosnia to Kosovo, the time I was working on the UCOM staff, European Command staff, and NATO commander. And so we had a very robust general to general officer conversation, okay? And we talked about leadership, and I talked about young cadets that were coming there. And he just said, well, Brian, look, you're a general, you led thousands of soldiers before, give them something at the level that they can take with them. Everything above the level, that's what, for you and I to talk to the colonel. So that's why I'm more interested in, I just want to make sure you get around the track the first time. Don't worry about going at a long distance, okay? And you are going to have challenges among your peers, among other people. One person's country western, the other boy is hip hop, and the other person reads the Bible, one don't. You're going to meet all kinds of challenges. But that's why you're trained as an officer to grow up and learn how to handle responsibility and handle challenges. Because you have the lives of those soldiers in your hand. And they know you're young. Some have been in the military already like 4 or 5 years, you're fresh out of college, and they know this. So I got one more question, I just got a final comment to say, and can I wrap it up now? Yes. Well, let me leave y'all with this, and I always call it the 5 watches. Watch your thoughts, they become words. Watch your words, they become action. Watch your actions, they become habits. Watch your habits, they become character. Watch your character, for it becomes your destiny. Little Rock, Arkansas has a famous song. Thank you very much.